I don't like this new video format on Skype.
Some new shit. Yeah, I haven't updated anything.
Oh, dude, it's disgusting. It's like it puts us like side by side instead of like you as my main screen and like a tiny box of me in the corner.
Oh
It puts
no.
us like side by side. So my face is like in my as I'm speaking, I'm like watching myself. It's fucking weird, dude. I don't like it. Dude, all these
Yeah,
people
it's
like they
terrible.
yeah, they're making this bullshit. Okay, that's better. I switched it back. Yeah, dude, that's horse shit. All this technology, dude, like they're not making anything better. It's making it worse. Like less intuitive, less easier to use, and fucking stupider to look at.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No! Inner
Resources.
life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
Fucking new moon, dude.
Yeah. Not as much good content here,
What's
sex-wise.
well, it's funny because this, I would say, yeah, more happens in this book, but
Oh yeah. No,
this,
it's definitely it's Twilight 2.0.
the new and improved update
Oh yeah. Except not because
from Windows XP to like Windows
there's
7.
it's like if you could take sex more out of it. If you could make it less hot somehow. Except it's not. I don't know. I'm like, it's all the same. It's just all the same.
You mean the book? Or,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, it's the same characters and stuff, but yeah, I did talk about that it's basically the exact same plot over again, if we're talking plot-wise. But yeah, I did all that. We've
I don't
watched,
know. I just came off of watching the movie.
yeah, good.
Yeah. Um, movie was a fun time. Watched it with Bill. Had to explain a lot of things. He had quite a few questions.
Yeah, well, that's a good measurement too. Is like watching it with someone who's never read the books is always a good tell of whether or not it's well done or not, right? Like, if you
Yeah.
don't know all the stuff that happened in the book, can you still watch this movie and enjoy it, right? Like, that's literally the benchmark of adapting.
Yeah, I mean, but there's just also all this goofy shit. Edward's face, Eddie
Yeah,
Boy's face. It looks like he's wearing lipstick the whole time, and all of his sad faces just look kind of like he's smelling something bad and it's putting him in pain, which I get, like, it's the idea essentially that they're going for,
right.
except I guess he's supposed to be like smelling something good. But it looks like there are so many people in this movie that look like they just huffed a bad fart.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There's a lot of this, a lot of the slow motion stuff,
Yeah.
like
But
anguished
like
faces.
Jasper,
Yeah,
the actor,
it
like
always.
whatever he's doing with his face in the last movie and in this one, where I was like, he always kind of just looks like he's shitting himself a little
Yeah,
bit. And this time, there were moments where he was like, it still looked like he was shitting himself, but like he was enjoying it, you know?
yeah.
He likes it.
It made me think a lot of like that scene in Lord of the Rings where like I think it's the Two Towers where like Frodo and gets attacked by that spider.
In the movies well, in the books, it's the Two Towers. Or, wait, in the movie, it's the third movie, right?
I don't know. I think it was the Two
Or I don't know.
Towers
I always mix it up.
just
One of them.
because. But when he gets stung with that thing, dude, like they get like this close up on Elijah Wood's face, and it's like slow motion, and like he's getting stung with like that poison, and it just looks like he's like struggling to shit, like in that. I I remember when I always laugh because it was like this terrible, like, it looked like he was making some terrible face, like pushing.
Well, Elijah Wood always kind of, yeah, Elijah Wood always kind of looked like that throughout that movie whenever something was happening with him. Like whenever he was like putting on the ring, it kind of looked like he was coming or something.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. So if listeners haven't heard yet, we lied last week. We're not doing color this week. We pushed it off because now we have Twilight Fever, dude. We are reading all the
Yeah,
Twilight books just
we're just
because
Twilight fangirls now.
that, but it's also there is this, I don't know if it's just like completist kind of thing, like I want to know the entire story. But yeah, you
Well,
do
it's baffling because you understand how bad it is, but also like you can't not do it. And you don't even have like all of that like teenage girl insecurity deep down inside of you
know. I also don't
that
have
has that weird response
I want to talk about this too, but I also
to,
don't. Yeah, I also don't have the nostalgia because I never read these and like didn't watch the movies when they were big during that time. So
yeah.
it isn't quite nostalgia for me either. So I don't know what it is. I want to talk about it.
I mean, maybe it's that it's like easy. It just moves quickly. Like it's junk food, you know?
Yeah, maybe that.
There's some of that. But yeah, this is the book of Jacob, Daddy Boy Jacob.
Daddy boy,
Daddy Jacob.
Daddy Jacob.
So I was calling him for about half the book. I mean, there's a clear point where he transitions from young boy Jacob, like little like cuck bay Jacob, to Daddy Jacob.
Yeah.
And that's like when he becomes Eddie 2.0.
Who is Eddie?
Edward. Oh,
Oh,
I was also
Edward.
calling him Eddie in this book because I was sick of
Yeah,
writing out Edward.
Edward. Yeah,
I was
Edward
also sick of
disappears
saying
here. He kind of disappears in this book, which I was a little disappointed in, but I guess he does come back some.
Not a single person calls him Ed.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody calls him Ed. He's got no close
Jacob
friends.
gets Jake all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we discovered something fun in our in my well, I was reading some fun tidbits in the back of the book, checking out the acknowledgments page. Found some fun tidbits about Steph's inspiration.
Yeah. That was funny. I want to talk about that too, like the acknowledgments page. Oh, for listeners, well, I guess first we should say what podcast this is since we never tell people.
This is heavy board, bitch.
Heavy board. I'm Andrew Whitstadt.
I'm Sophie. Let's talk about Daddy Jacob.
Yeah, and I think we both have the same versions. We both have the Little Brown again. We just have like the whole series. If you go on Amazon, like it's literally they have them all and like recommended. If you click on one of them, it's like, yeah, why don't you buy all four? And I did. I bought all four. So now I'm an owner of the Twilight series in its entirety, and we'll get to it. We'll get to it here. First things first. Let's just do thoughts, and then we'll morph into whatever. What'd you think of the book?
I mean, it's bad and I can't stop, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I still enjoyed it. I had many criticisms, but I had a really fun time. It's a bad book, really fun. So I don't know if that actually means it's a bad book, but it's confusing. I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like most of my notes are critical, but I also enjoy like watching a shitty movie that you like, you hate watching it, but also you feel connected to it somehow. But this is different. This is like I feel more connected to this, I guess, because of the nostalgia thing and because of all the insecurities that I apparently troublingly still harbor somewhere in me.
Yeah. I liked this book better than the first book.
Yeah, there's less sort of just we're hanging out and we're talking.
But it isn't so much because it's like a good book.
Yeah.
But it's there is something, and that's why I kept thinking about this. Like, it's not nostalgia for me because yeah, like although, and this gets to that acknowledgments page that you went to talk about. Like, it was, I am nostalgic for the period, not necessarily Twilight as like an intellectual property or like a phenomenon, but I am nostalgic for that time period because that was like my coming of age years, right?
Peak emo.
The emo era, yeah, like the emo era, yeah, absolutely, that's what it
Emo
is.
takeover.
And I was
Emo
thinking,
takeover 2008.
yeah, and I was thinking about that. Like, it was at first, I was like, okay, Twilight is stupid, it's lame, but it's like, it is part of that kind of emo hot topic era era
There you go.
with
Era. You
yeah,
know,
it's
it could be
earlier.
both.
It's earlier than usual
It
when we
could
record.
have been an error.
I haven't finished my coffee yet. Yeah, we're like my
Many
brain's
people
working
would
slow.
say that the emo period was an error.
Oh,
That it was a mistake.
I don't think so. I fucking like
Um,
it. I think people we kind of we make fun of it now. Like, people do pretend that it was like awful, and I guess like a lot of the fashion was awful, but it was like, I mean, it was a huge thing. Like, everybody was feeling that. Like, it's very millennial, right? Like, the emo sensibility
yeah.
is exclusively millennial.
Nobody understands me. I mean, that's exclusively teenager, maybe. But yeah, the whole emo thing, I think, was sort of really, it boomed at that time. It boomed during our high school.
Yeah.
So she has this paragraph at the end of her acknowledgments for this book. I didn't look at the one for Twilight. I wonder. And finally, thank you to the talented musicians who inspire me, particularly the band Muse. There are emotion scenes and plot threads in this novel that were born from Muse songs and would not exist without their genius. Also, Linkin Park, Travis, Elbow, Coldplay, Marjorie Fair, My Chemical Romance, Brand New, The Strokes, Armor for Sleep, The Arcade Fire, and The Fray have all been instrumental in staving off the writer's block.
She
Also,
basically
her brother's name is Jacob.
she
She found
basically
creepy.
lists all like the top hit emo things that were happening at the time.
I mean, definitely the big bands, or, a handful of them.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like, I when you first showed me that, Sophie sent me like a picture of just like the last paragraph in the acknowledgments for the New Moon version where she lists all these bands. Like, where Stephenie Meyer is listing all these bands that she like is that Sophie just read, you know, that inspired her. And whatever. Like, I listen to music and stuff, especially during editing and things like that. Like, whatever. My instinct when you showed me that was to make fun. And we did. Sophie and I definitely made fun back and forth via text. But
Like,
then
oh shit, you put that in the book?
yeah. Well, it was a different time, dude.
I told people.
It would probably be considered cool at that time.
I don't know, man. The cool kids at school didn't think that, like, my
Emo,
My Chemical Romance t-shirt was hot.
right? That's
They
true.
weren't like, that's cool. She knows cool. It was cool to the people that would buy into this book.
What was the cool thing at that time, though?
I mean, we were in high school, so it was about like, I mean, at least for me, I went to a public school, so I guess you went to school with all dudes. So, but I mean, it was very cliquish, so it was still like sort of classic popular kid shit, jocks, preppy girls. I don't know. Is the dynamic different now? I assume that that's still like a thing, even if, you know, it's like less uncool to be a loser now or something, which I just refuse to believe, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's just a lie. Yeah, all these people pretending that our first mistake, yeah, was pretending that nerdiness was any way related to coolness. Like it's not. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm trying to think back of like, okay, what was the cool thing? It's like the cool thing was what, like jam bands. I remember, like
Ugh.
that, but they
God.
weren't cool either. Like like it was.
They sucked. People just no. People just learned at some point that they wanted to be stoners, and that like I don't know, like a select few kids who like listen to Fish
Like
or
Miles
Grateful
Davis.
Dead.
Yeah. Like Miles Davis, I've been swayed by the cool.
Dude, it was, I don't know. I remember like having the one friend who was like hanging out with some guy who had a jam band and going to a jam session and being so fucking bored. Like, and he wasn't hot and his music wasn't cool and I didn't care. It's like, this is really boring. Can we stop pretending that it's fun?
Well, I just remember like Jack Johnson was big then too, but like was that even cool? Like I
Yeah,
thought that was
I
like
don't fucking know.
well, I guess in the circles we hung out in we made fun of that, but we're like Jack Johnson, Jax Johnson or whatever, Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. We'll keep talking about this as we go bring it up because I am as we like I said we started making fun of it as soon as like we texted back and forth about the acknowledgments of these kind of like dated bands now too. I mean, a lot of these bands aren't even around anymore. There's like this was 15 years ago, so it's like. But then as I thought more about it, I was like, okay, my instinct is to make fun of this, but then
Because of the
also
fray.
like this was part of like the larger pop culture at the time. Like who she named these bands? Those bands all
I mean, I
had like
think the
top.
Fray was kind of like not really emo. Like they were just sort of like what regular bitches listen to.
Yeah, and the Fray, but it had like that. This was like very. I
'Cause
want
that
to
had some good radio play too. We were
right
still
because I always
radio kids.
I compare like the Fray to like the National or something like the.
Nah. I mean, yeah, but
Yeah,
worse.
but there was this dark undertone to like the pop piano music that they were
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
making, so they do kind of fit in a way, and they were like all
It
those.
was like the One Republic of that time. It was the One Republic of that moment.
What's One Republic?
And pull up one of their songs real quick. Just type in One Republic.
Oh
You'll
no, I'm not doing that. No. Are
that song
they?
that's like too late to apologize.
I don't know. I mean, I've probably heard it,
Oh.
but yeah, I don't keep up with anything, dude. Like I don't
I
keep
mean,
up with any.
this was from like a good while ago.
Yeah, then I might have my memory jogged, but still,
Dude.
because it was something like, and I guess what I'm trying to say, this is a long way of saying that like this novel series and movie series was definitely tied into that. Like you can't separate them from like the emo thing that happened in our culture back then and this vampire kind of watered down
Oh,
vampire
the
romance
vampire
series.
thing. And I'm sure that was always like somehow connected, even like, I'm sure like the whole goth thing has existed for quite a while. And that the whole vampire thing was probably around for that, in some capacity. There was some kid walking around with like pale makeup or, same thing with like the cat girls.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not talking about like girls who like cats. I'm talking about like girls who wear like cat ears to class and shit. I mean, like that might be different now, but when I was in high school, that was like, oh, you're strange.
It's yeah, that's not a normal thing to do. Yeah, it's not a normal thing now either. Like when people are doing that, like no, it's not
I
cool.
mean, I
Like
don't know, man. I'm not in high school now.
yeah, dude. I mean, dude, like it's not. It's the same though. Like that's what I like. You were right. Like it's the same. Like it's yeah. The kids that wear cat ears to high school now, like they're still not cool. Okay, like they're still fucking freaks. All right. Like
I mean, like they might. I mean, maybe they have a group
A
of more.
cattier.
Maybe there is a larger cattier movement
Yeah, I don't think so.
and acceptance. Maybe they found their maybe they found their club.
We are
Maybe
the
they
ones
found their
that wear
tribe.
cat ears. Maybe they have some secret society in Italy or something, dude, that like they all wear cat ears as they go to these old churches.
Yeah.
The what's all right. All right, so we're gonna keep bringing up this emo period because I think it is vital now. Like I said, my instinct was to make fun of it and be like, "This is stupid," but then I put on Muse, and I put
I
on,
was listening to Louder Now. I was listening to Louder Now yesterday morning. It was
yeah,
great.
dude,
Bill walked in and I was like jamming out hard to I'll Let You Live.
yeah.
Like it was meaningful. Yeah,
Sophie and I texted
it was
about
good.
this. Yeah, Louder Now is hands down the best emo album ever written.
I don't know if I mean, it's great.
I'll
I
die
don't
on
know if
that
I'm
hill,
prepared to
dude.
say that. Hey, I don't blame you. It's a really good one.
Like
There are some other really good ones out there.
which other ones come close? I have a few in
I
mind, but
mean, brand
yeah,
new.
I was gonna say which Deja Entendu or
That's up there.
that's what I
That's
say. Yeah,
one of
that's up there.
them.
That's up there. That's what I'd be willing to argue with somebody and like
What's the
respect.
one before that with Jude Law and A Semester Abroad and 70 times 7 or whatever?
Right, right, right. But I just mean like
That was a great one.
cohesive, coherent, like
Yeah.
entire album wise, like just start to finish.
Yeah,
Like Deja Entendu is probably a better album than the previous one, right? Like I think
it's
that's
true.
we could objectively say that, and then I would be like, so yeah, I was thinking that, and then I was thinking, okay,
I think
yeah,
mo
go for it. Yeah.
Modern Baseball, You're Gonna Miss It All is pretty great.
Yeah, what year was that?
I'd have to look
I
it
think that was
up.
they were a little bit later, but they were definitely listening to Taking Back, like they were definitely
Yeah,
listening
yeah,
to
yeah.
Louder
They were
Now.
definitely later. I didn't listen to them until I was like probably in my 20s, I think.
Well, they're a little younger than us, Modern Baseball, so it was like
Yeah.
but yeah, they're good, but they were a little bit like after the height of the emo craze, where
Yeah,
like
but brand new is big. I'll stand by that one, My Chemical Romance album.
which one?
I don't think it's the best one out there, but it was one of my favorites. Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge.
Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge. It's funny because I was thinking about that
It's
too,
fucked up.
because
Good one.
the Black Parade I think is their best album. My Chemical Romance's best album. And I was thinking that too is like that might be one of the top emo albums ever written too. Guess what? Came out the same year as Louder Now, which is the same year that Muse
Yeah,
released Black Holes and Revelations. Like
that's
literally
fucking great.
2006. So this book came out in 2006,
I
listeners,
mean, is that the
and
best Muse album?
uh I don't know, and I wouldn't call Muse emo. It was
No, not quite, but
it,
it's there.
it's
I
there.
mean, it's like
It's just not as explicitly like emo as a genre.
he he's like I always felt like, you know, who's that guy from that band that I fucking can't stand? Maroon 5. Who's that guy? Who's Maroon 5 guy?
Adam Levine.
Adam Levine. Fucking can't stand him. And I always thought that Muse was like, you know, but Adam Levine could never be.
Hmm. It's funny because songs about
Like
Jane, I
Adam
think,
Levine didn't suck.
yeah, but I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm sure it's catchy. I think I just got really annoyed with it at some point, and then they progressively continued to like get bad, like get worse.
yeah. But I just mean like 2006. So this book came out in 2006, right? We already talked about the first one, Twilight, last episode, and that was 2005. And then the series kind of got big and it started taking off. And I think it was like boom, 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 like they just released one after the other. Because she'd already been working on these books. Like I think she said she started writing the first one in 2003. Takes a couple years to get that published. By the time that got published, she'd probably already finished the sequel. And then you could just easily just bang them out when there was a demand, kind of thing. But I just like that whole like that's like it's and that's when I started thinking about like it's easy to make fun of those kind of bands that we would be like, and she's a little older than us, right? So she wouldn't have been as in, to the emo stuff, but she's not that much older than us that she was like
I mean, she
oblivious.
was okay. Yeah, and I had like, I said this when we were reading Twilight again, as a person who like, coming to terms with the fact that as an adult, I'm still enjoying this. And I'm just accepting it and like, fuck it. But
Well, that's what I mean.
what was I gonna say?
Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, no. Like, I mean, she was 29, 30
right.
when she wrote Twilight
Like,
and she wrote the first book. And like, one of the first things I was like, is like, how can you write this? Like, as at that age, like, how can you write these characters this way? And that's not like, to be a dick, like sincerely like trying to understand like what had to be going on in her brain. And we were sort of like cracking jokes about her like being a Mormon.
oh yeah.
Like,
Well, I think it's more
and like
important.
all
Like,
that
it's
shit.
yeah, we joke about it, but like it is a factor in terms of.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all met Mormons, right? I don't know, listeners, if you've met Mormons, but they tend not to be the most cool people.
I mean, there's no denying though that like she does call it like whether it was on purpose or not, and I can't say. I don't fucking know. But she does sort of really tap into that you know, teenage girl insecurity
Yeah,
really
and you can
like
speak to that better than me. I mean, I that's the one thing
perfectly, and I'm not saying like in a way that makes the story better or something, but definitely in a way that successfully, I think, draws in a reader who is going to be like 17 or has any memory of being 17. And I think that like is probably a lot of what made it successful. I mean, obviously the romance angle.
and it wouldn't have been successful if it wasn't like the height of emo music, emo
Yeah.
fashion, emo black nails, big blow dried
She's
hairs,
different. It's
studded
cool when
belts.
she's different.
Yeah, girls wearing their dad's bowling shirt, like like we talked about
She's
last.
weird.
Like it was.
She reads.
Everybody wearing Chuck Taylors,
Yeah.
all of that, dude. Like it
Like the
was.
hipster thing was coming around. I mean, like, I know that that's existed as long as fucking time, right? But, like,
Well,
I guess every generation has a moment or something,
I
and
think
that,
it's a good
you know,
point.
that leading up to ours.
I think it's a good point because tying in. I know we're talking about
It all
music.
came into style.
What?
It all kind of came into style to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah, and I think we could talk about the history like it did. Like okay, so indie rock was around since the '80s, right? Like indie rock really started to become a thing, and then like emo definitely came out of like the hipster indie rock scene from the '90s, right? Like emo definitely came out
Yeah,
of
a
that,
little bit of, like,
and then
the wannabe punk rock kids.
right, but then emo became like the cool cultural thing for a few years. Like even Green Day like started doing
Yeah.
like more of an
Wearing
emo thing,
eyeliner.
whereas they were more. And I mean, they still doing the pop punk, but they were much more punk in the '90s before emo was a thing.
Yeah.
Like kind of.
Well, they were more like my dad listened to Green Day until probably into like up until American Idiot.
Oh, did he really?
Like that was, I mean, I learned of Green Day because my dad had Dookie.
Oh wow,
Like, great album.
damn dude, he was ahead of it. My parents were definitely not that cool in terms of music.
My dad's pretty cool in terms of music.
Yeah. My parents were boomer rock, so like my dad was all
I
about
mean,
like
my dad was all that too,
yeah,
but he also,
which is great
like
stuff.
I remember
Yeah.
playing local natives for him, and he was like really into the drums on that album, Gorilla Manor.
Yeah, I never liked local natives when they blew up for that like 3 years that they did. But I know
I
they were
mean,
big.
that album is good. And every once in a while they put out a hit, but yeah, they're not all winners, and they're nothing like super special.
Yeah.
That was also past the peak nostalgia, like music of my youth.
Well, that's what I mean, and I think I was conflating those because this is such a part of it. Like that's the whole reason I'm bringing any of this up, and we're talking about like albums on a book podcast now, like because I think it is so ingrained into this series, this particular vampire series. There have been vampire series before, there have been vampire series since. This one is particularly tied in to the emo movement happening between 2004 and like 2010. All right, like that is literally, would not have existed if that was not a cultural moment for like that 6 years, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and through this whole book, Bella's basically like an emo kid without the emo getup.
Which was the cool thing to be at the time,
Yeah.
right? Like they went to Hot Topic and bought studded belts.
Yeah, except she didn't like. That's what I mean. Like she wasn't like. How would that have played out if she like we had an idea of Bella as like this girl who wore studded belts?
It would be a little darker, or at least pretend to be a little darker. 'Cause,
I don't know. Like I can't figure it out because I feel like there's something missing from like every character in terms of like any amount of depth. And like, you know, I think that was the same problem with Twilight. I think it's the same problem with the movies. I mean, it's one of the many problems with the movies and the book. Like, and again, that doesn't detract from my enjoyment, really, I guess, because I still need to read the next one, even though I think I read it long ago enough that I don't really actually remember.
right. It's funny because
Like, I remember the big things. Like, I remember that certain things happen, but I don't actually remember. And maybe it's because nothing happens
I mean, I feel
to some
compelled
degree.
to finish this, and I know that I'm going to be disappointed. Like I know,
Yeah, and you are already disappointed every
right?
time. But I also like think there's something to like I watch shitty movies all the time and enjoy the shit out of it, knowing full well that like, oh, this is bad, and I'm like shitting on it the whole time, and I'm like, maybe that's like some fucked up problem with me, which in that case, it's a fucked up problem with a lot of people. I don't know,
Nah,
but
you
like, I
know,
mean, it's like I hate watching anything. Like we all do it, but also somehow, I guess with the book, it's different because there's some part of me that feels like a little bit connected. And I think that might be just like, you know, I mean, everything I've already said. It's like the nostalgia and also, you know, those deep insecurities.
yeah. And it's now that you bring that up, this I kept thinking as based on
Oh,
our
and
last
also all the shirtlessness.
the
That's
what?
compelling for me. The shirtlessness is also compelling for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do have a whole thing. I took a few notes about the physiques. I know that sounds, I know it sounds very homoerotic, but I swear I'm not gay. No, it's like, yeah, I did notice that because I remember that was a big thing. I remember reading interviews and stuff when this was the biggest thing on pop culture at the time, specifically with Taylor Lautner, right? And like the guys that played the wolves.
Lautner.
Lautner, whatever the fuck his name is. Again, I don't remember him because he's
Yeah.
insignificant now. He doesn't matter. But I remember reading interviews with them when this was like the biggest thing on the planet Earth. You couldn't go on social media or anything without seeing
Twilight something.
Twilight something, you know. And this was later after the series had been completed, so the movies were all popping out, you know, one after the other, making a fuckload of money. Everybody was going to see them. And I remember them talking about the workouts and the diets that they had to be on. And then in the later, I mean, of course, they don't say this in the interviews, but I'll talk about this when we get to the later movies a little bit. Maybe, I don't know. This is a book podcast, so nobody's interested in this but me. And it's just like the amount of workouts that they had to do, the cutting, the competitions. Like they said that they were working out 3 times a day and competing with each other who had the best body. Of course, then they get into like, you know, the kind of steroid use that happens when you're an actor and you're supposed to have a good physique, right? Like this is what happens.
That's fucked up.
Okay, they're never going to admit it, but every actor that has a good physique is, especially if they're in their 30s and 40s, Ryan Reynolds, anybody, they're doing steroids, okay? Like they're doing steroids. Like there's no way to achieve that as a man in your 40s, even if you do a great diet and exercise, without taking...
Taylor Lautner looks young as shit.
And he is, right? I think he was only like 15 or 16.
He had... 15? No. 15?
In the first movie, he looked like he could be like 15.
I mean, he looks like a baby. He has a fucking baby face, and the
Right.
hair makes it so much worse. They give him that
Well,
long hair. Like, this is one thing I'm mad about. Like, as a viewer, they could have done me the service of just chopping it off at like the shoulder. Like, at least like that'll keep him young looking, but at least hot. Like, it's not flattering,
well, and I think
and it didn't please me.
he is
It's
supposed
like,
to. If you go through the
what?
books, he is supposed to be, like 15, shorter than Bella, and then in this next
Yeah,
book, he's hitting puberty hard, so he's like shooting up to six foot
yeah.
six,
Full
and
puberty.
yeah, and is muscular
Big
and
boy
like
Jacob.
yeah, and he's getting the stuff you get as you mature as a man, so his jawline's becoming more pronounced. You're losing the baby fat essentially, right? Like
Yeah, he's a big boy.
yeah, and he's still
I
supposed to
believe
be.
Bella refers to him as huge. Yeah, I enjoyed that. It's like,
Yeah,
fuck
dude.
yeah.
But I'm pretty sure as we continue this series, we're gonna see more and more of the physique, like the framing of that. And there were some very specific parts where they were like specifically framing, like especially Jacob's body because he was always shirtless in like the movie.
Yeah, fucking Eddie Cullen finally takes his shirt off in this movie too. Did he
Hmm.
take it off in Twilight at all? I don't
Uh,
recall if he did.
he unbuttoned it in the movie, like he unbuttoned a shirt to show like the sparkling diamonds in the first movie, but I don't think he. Uh,
That part's lame.
it is lame. It's not as sexy either as like
No, it's never sexy.
yeah.
Like I don't know how to say this, but a dude with a full glitter bod. And I guess it's supposed to be like otherworldly or something, but it doesn't
Yeah.
do it for me.
We talked
I
about
mean,
that. Yeah.
it's just a workaround, you know?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
really just like a workaround so he doesn't like
Burst into flames.
have- yeah. Actually, he's just beautiful in the sun.
He looks like
He
a jewel.
glitters like a diamond.
Yeah.
But, I mean, whatever. Yeah, and the way I mean, so yeah, the Jacob bod is pleasant. Um, in the film, the Edward bod is pale but still pleasant. The pale is a problem. It looks like the dude is wearing lipstick,
Right.
and it prevents some of the hot from being there. It just always looks like he's doing something weird with his face.
Yeah.
And this cry face is really bad. His like in pain face is disappointing.
And it's not like they make Kristen Stewart like very sexy or anything. She's still supposed to be like a kind of unsure teenager in this movie. Uh,
Yeah,
but a lot of
still has
this
girl next door vibe,
girl next door vibes,
like
but there's a lot of
offbeat girl next door vibe.
there's a lot of slow motion running of Bella in the second movie. I noticed,
Yeah.
and I noticed.
I didn't notice that.
Well, it looked as if Stewart probably wasn't wearing a bra for most of it, so they were all trying to do this kind of like sex it up more in the movie, I think,
Yeah.
kind of. Not that she's like
It-
incredibly busty, right? Like it's not like she's like flopping
No, I mean,
everywhere,
it's not
but
like she has tits out, you
right,
know?
yeah. That's what I mean. But like a little bit of like, ugh. Like I noticed like in the very first scene when she's like slow motion,
She's
it's like
definitely hotter. She's got less of a baby face. Still
right.
has a real girl next door kind of vibe.
Well, my opinion
Jacob,
is
Bill was bringing this up and I laughed, but he was like, God, he just comes off like such a dweeb.
he's a terrible
That's
actor.
true.
He's a terrible
He
actor.
does come off like a real fucking dweeb.
Yeah, and there's I get why they cast him, and then they were kind of stuck with him, right? Like kind of because you cast him as like a 15-year-old, and then like you got to have him for these 5 movies, and it's he's a bad actor. Is
He's
part of the
not-
problem.
I mean, wasn't he like Shark Boy and Lava Girl? I remember that like weird Disney Channel movie.
I don't. I've never. I remember the title. It looked familiar, but I don't think I've ever seen it. Or I was maybe too old or too. Like, I was too cool for Twilight at the time, dude. Like at least I thought I was.
I mean,
Yes.
I was too old for when this came out, but like I feel like I vaguely remember that being a thing that was like always on. And then I just recently, I think one of like the YouTube commentary channels that Bill watches, they like will go back over like these old Disney Channel movies and how bad they are. I mean, they're very bad. It's great. I
I
enjoy
was
it.
never a Disney
but
Channel kid because yeah,
I
my
was a
wife
major.
will. Yeah, my wife will bring that up all the time about how she was like a Disney Channel kid, so she knows all
It
those.
was so exciting to me when Disney Channel became
Uh,
like a regular thing because it used to be a thing that like we just got when we were like went on vacation.
yeah, you had to pay extra with like cable packages to get it. Although I think that used to not be the case. I think the Disney Channel used to just like be on like basic TV, and then like when cable became like the big thing, you had to pay extra for the Disney package. All right, so we haven't even talked about the book.
No.
We're like 40 minutes in. All right,
Well,
that's cool.
yeah, I mean, all right.
All
Can
right,
we just like skip over the preface? We get this preface. It's
I
really
want to, dude.
short.
Before the preface, dude, I was like Shakespeare quote. She's got Romeo and Juliet all over
Oh,
this
yeah,
fucking thing, dude.
there's the Romeo and Juliet thing.
These violent delights have violent ends. What Westworld. Okay, I was just thinking, I was like, wait a minute, who was using this quote all the time recently? And I was like, oh, that Westworld series, which I stopped watching
Uh,
after halfway through season
yeah,
two. But
yeah, it got bad.
it got yeah, it got way too
I
convoluted and
mean,
stupid.
I didn't think it was very good before it got really bad. It was just good enough to keep watching, but
I liked the first season, but
so bored
the
until the end of every
reveals,
episode.
yeah, the reveals
Oh,
in
I was so
seasons,
bored. It was
yeah,
like always like 35 minutes of being bored and 10 minutes of shit happening on either end of the episode.
yeah,
It's
it's,
so
I think that show got overwritten fast. Like, it's like too complex for a TV show. Like, it's
like,
like,
yeah, well, the show for the writers.
yeah, well, it's like, yeah, like you can write very complex, convoluted shit in novels where you're reading every detail and like figuring that out as you read. But for visual mediums like that, it just doesn't work. Like, there's a
There's too much,
disconnect. Yeah.
way too much to follow.
You have to simplify the storyline, yeah, and cut out some of the fat in order to make it
Not
work.
a lot to follow here.
But all right, the
My,
Shakespeare
my,
quote.
my.
And honestly, I was impressed that she went with Shakespeare this time and not the Bible, like the last book.
Were you?
I mean, I wasn't like, oh wow, like, but I was like,
Step up.
yeah, I was like, that's a little bit of an
I
improvement here,
mean,
Stephanie. Yeah,
there's a very heavy foreshadowing that I think comes with making use of Romeo and Juliet.
it is. It is
And
too much. Yeah,
and yeah, and I mean, you don't have to read into it, you know. You could just sort of be like, "Oh, which as they kiss consume." Right? The whole quote is, "These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss kiss." I mean, even for like the last one, that you could just be like, "Oh yeah, vampire."
yeah,
But I mean, I think there is like a bit of a hefty foreshadowing that happens all throughout here, not necessarily like in the best way. I mean, it's a teens book, so it's not like doing any sort of really fancy, like, you know, sly kind of references to Romeo and Juliet. It's all pretty just sort of spoken, you know, plainly.
yeah.
Occasionally
We talked
referenced.
about, yeah. We talked about that with the Stephen King episode too, listeners. Available at patreon.com/heavyboard. There's where a lot of the pop writers do this. A lot of pop writers, they get really into the idea of foreshadowing, and sometimes it's done really well, and then it usually gets overdone. Like it's laid on so thick that it starts to become, okay, we get it, bro. You know, like, we get it. Like,
The thing with foreshadowing is like once it's so much that you like really feel like you know what's going to happen next, it kind of loses.
right. So I mean, it's too much.
Like
Yeah.
the fun thing is when like you don't fully notice it. You're like, oh shit,
Right.
that was foreshadowing that was happening before, you know?
Right. It all clicks eventually while you're like get to the end. Yeah, and you're like,
Because, like,
oh,
if you're casually reading, you're not always going to pick up on it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, it's all always very heavy. And I mean, I say some of that, but also obviously, like, there's, a memory of most of this book somewhere in my mind. So there were things that, like, I kind of remembered as they were happening. But there were things that, like, I wasn't sure of. And like the whole thing about Bella's delusions that we'll get to. But let's save that.
That and the Shakespeare references. I get the Romeo and
Yeah.
Juliet story, this love tragedy, but it is a little bit, it's a little bit bold when a writer's like, I'm like Shakespeare, and it's like,
Yeah, well, it's not even like I'm like Shakespeare. It's like this story is like this story. It's not like
and
she's trying to make this story like this story. And it's not like in the, you know, sort of way that you see in like pop movies that are just like fun and are trying to like redo Taming of the Shrew, but in a modern context without any really obvious, like it's just the same story as the Taming of the Shrew, but different.
right,
Right? Like that one with fucking Amanda Bynes forever ago.
she's the
What's
man,
that?
or
She's the man.
yeah.
That's the one.
I
The
say my
soccer one.
my favorite modern one is the 10 Things I Hate About You. Is the
I mean, that's a great one.
yeah, that's probably the best modern one I've ever seen for like Taming of the Shrew
Yeah.
adaptations.
Yeah, but
But
that kind of thing. Like
yeah,
that's usually what it's trying to do, but I don't think that's really I think that's what she's trying to do, but not in that way. And maybe again, like,
right,
eh, it's not like this is, I don't know, literary.
right. And it is just a
Either.
nod to like, okay, this inspired me kind of thing, right? So it's
I'm
not
not
like,
expecting much of it in terms of its allusion to Shakespeare.
yeah. And one thing I texted you about this too as I started reading it. I was just through the first couple chapters. Okay, so there's that Shakespeare thing to start, and through the first couple chapters, I texted Sophie and was like, "Yeah, you can feel Meyer is much more confident with the second book. Granted, she had never written a book before when she wrote Twilight, right? You can just feel that she's a little bit more, that she's like more confident, is growing a little bit as a writer in this second book. Like she's more confident with kind of, and I think this is why this book has more action and is like more, she's more willing to go there with certain things than to suppress like she was in the first book. And again,
Yeah.
slight. This is subtle. This isn't a huge thing, but I feel like you can feel it. Like as you like, yeah, this is a more confident writer than who wrote the first book. And I imagine when I get to the
Yeah.
third, it might be more confident too, and then you get to the fourth, it's probably more confident. But yeah,
Yeah, I'll be curious to read for that because I don't really, I don't remember.
it's little
But
things. Yeah, it's not like,
yeah.
oh, this is a huge improvement, a real return to form. No, it's just you can feel that she's growing and is a little more confident in herself and her abilities now that because she'd already put out a huge hit book, right? Like
Yeah.
that's going to give anybody a little boost to like, oh, well, maybe I should make the vampires do this. Ah, fuck it, I will. I'm like kind of thing. Like you can feel that she's less questioning herself, almost like a confidence, like in her own ability. And I think that you need that when to enjoy a book. If the author is insecure, you can feel it on every fucking page, like where like you're reading it. But so I saw like an improvement on that. All right, my first instance of like actual shit in the book. Bella admitting she wants to be a vampire.
Yeah, dude.
That was a big like what?
Well, didn't that happen at the end of Twilight? Like,
Uh,
wasn't that like
I don't remember.
that was like her being like, yeah, she was like, I need to be like you.
Yeah, it's so
And
subtle.
because
Yeah,
like, I think, I think that's how it ended.
I was kind of taken
Maybe
back.
it's
Yeah,
not.
I didn't expect it
Maybe
at
I'm
all.
just they're blurring together to me. But I
Yeah,
feel like it comes up at the end. Like, yeah, because they were like, why didn't you just like you could just let it happen, right?
right.
Because she was gonna turn.
Oh, right. Okay, so yeah, the ending to that does kind of imply But I did say, like, for me, it
And
was
then
the
she was like, why didn't you let it happen? Like, blah, blah,
right.
blah.
And for
You
this
know?
one, I just said this was the first time that she just came right out and said it. Like, page 10 in this one, listeners, page 10 in New Moon, it was just like Bella's like, I want to be a vampire, basically. Like, I want to be
Yeah.
turned. And it makes sense with the kind of Romeo and Juliet themes. It makes sense for the story, right? If you love each other and you want to be with each other forever, well, eternal damnation, or like
Be
eternal
damned.
life gives you what you want, essentially, right? That you can now be in love forever because you won't die.
Forever.
Yeah.
The thing I enjoy, though, is that, like, this all begins with Bella's anxiety about aging.
Oh, right, the grandmother dream.
Like, she has this dream that she's old and she's still with Edward and he's still 17 and beautiful and she looks like her grandmother. And she's freaking out, so we open with her 18th birthday and she's like, fuck, now I'm older than you.
Which is a trope in a lot of vampire kind of series, right? Like, yeah, vampires don't age and humans do, right?
But yeah, also just like the whole aging anxiety and like you won't want me anymore when like I'm old and you're, you. And so there seems to be a lot of that feels like it's driving it at first much more than just like the I want to be able to keep up with you or I don't want you to have to protect me.
Right.
And I am kind of surprised it doesn't lean into this like this whole like I want to live forever thing. That also seems like very teenager. So like there's part of me that like I'm like, yeah, you could like let us into that sort of potentially taboo space in Bella's head and make her a little bit more real. But I guess the concern with that is that she looks bad maybe to the reader.
Yeah, and this is where the foreshadowing starts coming in very heavy-handed too, right? Like the age metaphors, the Romeo and Juliet we already talked about, just very heavy-handed, and I was just like kind of is heavy-handed foreshadowing. I was thinking to myself, like, is this a sign of insecurity as like a writer that you're not trusting your reader enough to know what you're getting at with just the more subtle foreshadowing, or is it just this is
Well,
only her for her
Bella
second book?
being like not more honest about like not having her be more I don't know, she's pretty upfront about like the aging thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think there is that sort of there's something in here that it's like, yeah, also like the living forever thing.
yeah,
Um yeah, I don't know. I mean, not that that's like necessary, but whatever. Yeah, we get that, but the big thing is that it's her 18th birthday, right? We get the sense that they've been like hanging out for the last however long. It's her senior year of high school.
yeah. So we end the first book in the spring of her junior year, and then we start this next one in the fall of senior year, kind of thing. But I mean, I don't really. I mean, whatever. That's fine. That's just storytelling, whatever. But like, what I want to talk about the breakup, and I think this happens right at the end of chapter 2, right? The breakup.
Yeah.
The breakup, listeners. Meyer has this thing where all the big events that are supposed to carry a lot of weight in the story don't.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, maybe even okay, so before we get there,
Yeah, speak
I
on
want to
it, Seth.
comment on something.
Yeah, comment it.
Because page 18, they're talking about Romeo and Juliet.
Page
Before, yeah. They're watching Romeo and Juliet before Bella goes to her own birthday party at the Cullens. And yeah, heavy foreshadowing around their discussion of Romeo's ease of suicide and how Edward would have killed himself had she died in the last book. So, foreshadowing there, then we talk about the vault. This is the first, I think, mention. Maybe it happens in the first book,
Yeah,
but
they
we
talk about
get,
it in the
I
first
don't,
book. Well, one thing I noticed in the movie with this is they put a scene from the first book in the second movie, and that's that scene in Carlisle's study where Edward's showing her the portrait of the Volturi and Carlisle in it and explaining Carlisle's family history in the first book, Twilight, and then in the movie they just add that scene in because they cut it out in the first book. So we have to add all this information about the Volturi into, so that the watcher can understand, the movie viewer
yeah,
can
yeah.
watch and understand what was happening. So there's that they do in the movie, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so they just tell
it's
us about this ancient family, this ancient
right.
vampire family that like rules the vampires, I guess, and lives in Italy and whatever. And like those are the people that you go to if you want to try to die as a vampire, I guess, which seems like kind of silly that that's the only way, but sure. So we get that, and that seems like it should be a bigger thing for something that doesn't get mentioned for like another 300 pages again.
Yeah, I do wish they would have mattered a little bit more. The breakup.
The breakup. Yeah. Well, so the thing that occurs at the end of this chapter, right? I mean, fucking, she goes to her birthday party, and what happens? She gets a fucking paper cut opening a present. And this sets off Jasper, I guess, which in the movie is the vampire that always looks like he's shitting himself. We've got this weird, socially awkward, distant face.
Gotta get on that Metamucil game, dude.
And yeah, and he like basically tries to attack because he smells her blood. And then and then we get the breakup. The dumping.
Yeah, and the breakups, and let's talk about the breakups between Bella and Edward, and then the kind of breakup between Bella and Jacob. Like, if we want to call that a breakup, I'm calling it one, but it's like I said, it's a kind of common theme in these books that I've noticed, where it's like these events that are supposed to be carrying a lot of weight always fall a little flat in these. And the breakup is one where it doesn't make a lot of sense. You know what I mean?
It doesn't. But I also think that if you're like an emotional girl reading this, you're like, oh my God, how could
Could
you
be.
do that?
I mean,
Like, because that's
clearly,
how I
yeah.
remember feeling. I mean, I was pissed, but I was so invested in it that I was just pissed at him, you know? I wasn't paying attention to how bad the book was. I wasn't noticing that
Right.
when I was reading it the first time. And I remember being like fucked up over it. The thing that bothers me even more, I think, is how inconsequential of a moment the like Jasper attacking her is, and that's how it happens after all this shit that happens in the first book at the end where she actually almost fucking dies. He decides to stay, and then she gets a paper cut, and his bro is like, oh shit, I can't control myself. They take him out of the room. Nothing fucking happens. She doesn't almost die in this case, and he's like, I gotta go. It's not safe.
Right.
I'm not good for you. I don't even want you. And you're like, oh fuck, he's cruel.
I wonder if Beauty and the Beast is a more apt comparison to this. Yeah, I guess for me it was just, yeah, like I found this in the movie too, like the way they do the scenes, and I grant there's not a lot there. I guess it just wasn't enough for me. Like it just wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was me reading it like way back when. Now reading it, it's just like, it's
It also doesn't make sense that they break up and then like the whole family just leaves.
so goofy.
Yeah,
The
I,
whole thing is goofy.
it's fucking
It
lame.
served its yeah, it served for me, I guess. Hang on, my microphone just changed.
Yeah, check that shit.
It just changed back. Do I sound normal?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't fucking know, dude. It's not good.
It's fucking lame, dude. Yeah, the guy's just kind of like, all right. But whatever, go with it, right? And then after chapter 3, where we get those pages that just list the month. What'd
Oh
you,
my God, I
yeah,
was waiting for you to bring that up.
yeah,
I forgot. I forgot all fucking about that.
yeah.
What a cop out. That was like one of the first ones that I texted you about too, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait until you get to this moment.
That was one of the corniest things I'd ever seen.
Yeah, there are just pages that are like October, November, December,
You finish chapter 3,
January.
and then you just hit, yeah, these blank pages with a month written on them, as if you're going through the calendar. And then we start in January again. And I was
Yeah,
just like,
chapter 4. It's called Waking Up, and it's like this really, really.
shit, hold up, you just cut out.
Am I good?
Yeah, it's back. What were you saying?
Yeah, you get this really fucking dumb passage on the first page of chapter 4, and then it's like the next page is like a new chapter, but without a chapter heading. Like the chapter's actually starting.
Right.
You get this passage that starts with time passes, even when it seems impossible. So, really feeding into those emo girl sensibilities.
Our time is running out.
Even when each tick of the second hand aches like the pulse of blood behind a bruise. I mean, it's so emo, dude.
We didn't even talk about that yet. That was part of the whole emo craze too, right? The self-harm trend.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah.
And there's a lot of that in this.
Yeah. It was a big
Which we
part of the.
haven't gotten to yet. But
It was
we'll
a
get
big
there.
part of the emo culture. People are going to pretend that that wasn't part of it, but that was part of it. Like the fake, I want to kill myself.
Oh, yeah.
The
I
fake.
mean, like, really just, like, it's really just like being a teenager to the extreme.
Yeah. But I just mean
Yeah.
it was much more performative as part of the culture.
Yeah.
Than it was just like being a really seriously depressed teen that would do something like that. It was more of like the Marilyn Manson 9 Inch Nails aesthetic that kind
It
of
was fashion.
that also blossomed into the emo movement that happened.
It's fashionable to be in pain.
Yeah. Well, it was fashionable to perform it too, right? It was fashionable to, the cut my wrists and black
Look
my
like
eyes.
a person who's in pain.
Yeah. Cut my wrists and black my eyes. Yeah, like come on.
All right.
Yeah.
They
Like,
kind of sucked.
they did suck, but they were one of the first big emo breakthroughs too. Like
Yeah.
with that one song. But yeah, that was all part of it. So I get this whole depression and stuff like that. And then we get like that kind of you talk about that weird paragraph jump in the 4th chapter. There's like 2 instances where the format's just a little inconsistent when she's doing these jumps in the same chapter. One where like there was like stars. You know how sometimes writers novels will do that, kind of separate 2 sections with a little star or asterisk thing in between. She did that once and then never again, and the rest of it just had like a space between to show the shifting or the time
Yeah,
jump.
she did that more in the first book, didn't she? Stars?
I don't quite.
Maybe
Honestly,
not.
I don't remember.
Maybe not.
I don't think so.
But yeah, I remember the section jumps.
And it's
So,
only the
yeah.
once where she uses that kind of asterisk to do the section jump, and then back to just spacing. But little things like that make what we talk about. This is a recurring theme on this podcast. The separation between pop and literary fiction, and like these kind of little details maybe part of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing I wanted to get super in depth with on that. All right, Edward's voice in Bella's head.
Yeah. Oh, and mind you, before all of this, like the night before Edward leaves, it seems like they really want to fuck.
Before who leaves?
Before Edward dumps her,
Oh.
it seems like they really want to fuck. Well, Bella definitely does.
Well, they haven't had sex yet at this point.
No.
I guess they never technically have sex in this book, in this series. What?
I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. His cold penis.
It's cold throbbing dick.
His ice cold erection.
I wonder if it's extra hard. His body's all marble
You
like.
mean like rigor mortis?
Yeah, but also like what's I wonder like if his whole body's just like solid rock, you know? This is flaccid dick also like really solid.
I guess we'll have to do a little anecdotal testing, dude. No, but Edward's voice in Bella's head.
Edward's voice in Bella's head, yeah.
What did you think of
What
this?
did we
Yeah.
Uh,
What did you think of this?
I was really, I was confused. There was part of me that was like, is this gonna be something where like Edward can magically now get into her head?
That's
And
what I
like
thought it was at first. Yeah.
throughout, I really thought it was. Like I was convinced that this was like actually something that Edward was like, that he was like actually aware of what was going on in her life in these moments. But the first time it happens, the thing that I was most focused on was the fact that Bella's an asshole. Just a bad friend. Like, just a shitty friend. Like, she invites this girl out to go to a movie who she doesn't really want to hang out with and doesn't really like, and straight up says it in the book. And she was like, yeah, I like Angela better, but she's too perceptive of my mood, so I hang out with Jess because she's a dumb bitch. Basically it. And then, like, they pass this group of dudes that, like, her friends clearly freaked out by. They're like,
That most young women would probably be freaked out by these
they're like
drunk
a
men
group
outside of a
like,
bar.
drunk older dudes.
Yeah.
Which the way they do this
Catcalling?
in the movie, this scene in the movie is really stupid. But yeah, and like her friends calling to her, like, what the fuck are you doing? As Bella starts to like go toward them. Because she thinks that they're the same dudes that tried to like follow and I guess potentially like attempt to sexually assault her.
Right. Yeah, gang raper. Yeah.
Like, and she's like, I'm gonna go to them. I need to know. I need to know if they're the same dudes, which like it turns out that they aren't, I guess.
Right. Just some dudes outside of a
And her
bar.
friend's like, what the fuck are you doing? And is clearly bothered. Like,
It's clear, like, am I going to have to call the
makes her
cops?
see a movie that she doesn't want to, that her friend doesn't want to see. Makes her see this movie, then doesn't sit through all of it. And it's like, yeah, okay, like she's depressed. I don't know that I noticed this the first time I read it, but like she's a bad friend.
Yeah.
Like, and there's maybe so like maybe you can't be when you're like that bummed out, but Jesus.
Well, this is why
It's
I
like you're
brought up the self-harm as part of of the culture at a time. Like the self-harm is part of personality. You could say it kind of bled into our current, like, I mean, without emo, it was like a step we had to take to get to our current kind of obsession with like victimhood, things like that, right? Like this kind of obsession with I'm gonna hurt myself if you don't do this. I'm gonna be reckless and get on the back of this motorcycle with this strange man if you don't come back here, Edward. I'm gonna harm myself. I'm gonna put myself
Well, and
in
she like
danger.
knows she's being reckless, like that's part of the point. Like, so after this moment, she like hears Edward, and then we keep getting Bella like doing these reckless things that she's calling reckless and stupid, and knows that they're reckless and stupid, and is doing it specifically like because this is the only time she can imagine his voice clearly. Which is the thing that makes you think, I guess, that like it's actually happening and it's not just in her head, which we find out later it's not.
Right.
And so it's like, even though it would be kind of disappointing if it was in some way, it's more disappointing, I think, that it wasn't. One,
Right.
because like one of the main characters of the first book is absent for most of the second.
He's only in most of this
And
book
he's like
through.
the most motivating
Right.
character to read for. Like, I mean, I guess I was really reading for Bella, but like I remember being pissed. And it's stupid when he comes back,
The
but and it's stupid the way he leaves. Like, so yeah, it would make it less painful somehow to know that like he is like still a part of the story for, I don't know, like the 300 or 400 pages that he's missing from it in any like meaningful way.
yeah, I wanted to say I didn't mind the fact that she was having his voice in her head, but I minded it more when I found out it was just her imagination.
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's disappointing.
Yeah, it seemed more like a cheap trick when it wasn't actual communication between her and Edward.
And by the way, the whole thing is like, oh, there's this deep subconscious part of me that did know that actually you loved me. Like, and that's
Yeah, dude, and I noticed this more so when Bella is kind of leading Jacob on for like 200 pages,
oh
and
my God. I also thought she was a bitch for that too.
right, that's when I noticed that she was. I was like,
And they never make out.
right. I was like, Bella's always this perpetual like. I don't know. I said like not. I don't want to say victim, but like she's this perpetual kind of like, which is again part of emo, kind of the emo culture that was happening. Like crying about shit and like being like, oh, Jacob's so good to me. Like it's just it's. I love being around Jacob and he's so nice and makes me feel good, but it's still.
But I don't want to fuck him.
But I'm still like it's not my fault. Like it's not. I was just like, oh, what are you doing? Like, oh, this is annoying. All right, I marked page 280. Let me see.
I don't know, man, I marked so many pages.
Yeah, well, I didn't mark as much as I read through this book because, like I said last episode, we could beat this up structurally. We could beat this up in a literary framework, but that's easy. I don't really. I'd rather treat it as like a book than. We've said what we could say about that. Yeah. Well, the whole thing is when she said, "I cried myself to sleep over this boy. His harsh rejection had punched a painful new hole in what was left of my chest." And that was about Jacob changing, right? So Jacob's becoming a werewolf and they make it into this weird puberty thing where like you have to come of age to change into a werewolf. And then like she starts acting like Jacob did something wrong to her because she cried herself to sleep like a couple times. Like
Yeah.
and I'm just like, "Oh my god, like you're so fucking like this is very like holy shit. What an annoying bitch." His
Very
harsh
teenager.
rejection, as you wouldn't let him hold your hand, as you wouldn't let him do anything.
Well, when he like sort of already expressed his
Love.
oh. So he had already expressed his love. Okay, so up until this point, Jacob's like baby boy Jacob, and they like have clearly like this deep friendship, but also he wants to fuck.
Many
And
such cases with a teenage boys and teenage girls. Yeah.
and God, what? Yeah, like a number of things have happened like before this moment, where it's clear that like
She was using him. Like she was using him. Like
yeah. Well, first of all, and this I think is like worse in the movie too. Like she's clearly using him for like all of this shit and just happens to accidentally like become really good friends with him.
well
And it's
because
all in
yeah
this sort of selfish I feel better way. I
yeah
feel better when I'm with you way, and he clearly like is into her. and is like holding her hand, and then she's like, they do that weird like movie thing, and that's when he changes. Every time she sees him, she's like, "You're bigger now.
Your skin's so hot.
You're on fire right now. What's up with that?" Um, and then suddenly, like, Jacob is like, "I don't feel so good. I gotta go." And Mike was also sick at this movie, so they're like, "Oh, yeah, it's probably like a flu." Bella gets sick. I guess, like, Jacob ghosts her for a while because he's busy being a werewolf. What happens? He, like, comes to tell her, basically, that she has to figure out that he's a werewolf. Which is, like, the one good scene we get where he's like shirtless and he like crushes her body into his, and it's hot.
That scene in the movie is one of the things where I noticed the lighting. Right, the lighting was definitely made to make the
Oh
physique
yeah,
the physique pop when they
physique
hug. Yeah.
was popping.
Well, it's very
He didn't
shadowed.
look sick. He looked huge.
Yeah, when you light physique like that, I mean, lighting matters in terms of like if you want. And I mean, the other thing people don't understand, even though he was young and like he wasn't as jacked as he was in later movies. It's like Taylor Lautner, but it was. I mean, this is like people. They don't. I mean, you don't think about it because literally it's Hollywood, right? It's the magic behind the fantasy type thing. But like, you know how dehydrated he probably was for that scene. Like, he probably felt like shit, like to get that little low body
Just
fat.
seems like a really ripped nerd.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I just remember that scene, and I remember, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, they have the lighting really good in this scene for.
Tribal tattoo.
And I was like, yeah, this guy is probably so dehydrated. His head is probably throbbing as he's doing this scene with like Kristen
Yeah.
Stewart.
But this is also like when he takes over, he becomes Edward 2.0, and this is when he becomes Daddy Jacob.
Daddy
Right?
Jacob. What do you mean? Explain Daddy
Like
Jacob.
he shifts from being like he's younger than me and we joke about our age difference, and it's that like weird, like he's younger than me, he's into me, it's whatever. To like, oh, he's a tall boy now. Oh, he's so big. He starts calling her honey. Like, turns very daddy.
That's also where I was like, okay, so we're kind of repeating the plot of the first book, right?
Yeah, but it kind of worked, you know? Like, there's a lot of breath, also, by the way. Gross in every context, as far as I'm concerned. But you have to do it here to understand the closeness, I guess.
Yeah, and that is something like, but that's also one of the inconsistencies, right? Is that there's a lot of breath description in the close quarters, but then we also learn that like vampires don't breathe, but then also they breathe during these.
They
So,
don't need to breathe.
right, yeah, a little inconsistent, but yeah, whatever. I get it. This is
Also, they smell things and need their sense of smell, so it's confusing.
right. But yeah, when we kind of the guessing if Jacob's a wolf, and I was like, okay, this is exactly like last.
And suddenly he's less like a little boy and he's more serious and Edward-like. And now he's also a hothead, which is very different for Jacob up until now because he wasn't a hothead. That's a whole thing because the wolves are all hotheads now.
Yeah. And then there's like, I mean, this was the whole thing where it's like, Jacob's my best friend, but all this other stuff. Jacob getting friend zoned, dude. Jacob getting friend zoned and having to curl his tail between his legs. The end of this one chapter, so the end of chapter, on page 299, what chapter is this? Chapter 12. And I think this is after he's like, they're guessing like his werewolf status, where he's having her guess. That chapter ends with this rhetorical question that just pissed me off, because it was just another sign of like, you could cut that. Like, we don't need this laid on that heavy. Like, the reader already understands the conflict. Where like it says the werewolves had chosen a different path. Now, what should I choose? That
Yeah,
ends the
that's not
chapter.
needed.
I was like, yo, just cut that line. Like, who is your editor? Like, cut that shit. Cut that line and just end it with the werewolves had chosen a different path. It's like, okay, that's enough. Like, trust your reader.
Yeah,
We know.
yeah, from here on out, there's a lot of considering monster ethics, debating whether it's like okay, because up until
Which
now
monster is more noble?
Yeah. Is it ethical? Is it ethical to help the monster? And then like, but there's this whole thing set up, right? That there are these like there's this giant bear out in the woods that people keep seeing, and it keeps like killing people. We
Right.
don't. So up till now, Bella just thinks that once she figures it out, she's like, oh, it's werewolves. Werewolves are killing people. So she is under the impression, which is stupid. It feels stupid to some degree. Like, I don't know. I feel like that was something that was missing from the first book that needed to be in it, but I still think could have been better in this book.
Yeah. You could
Like
use...
we could use some element of murder mystery.
Yeah. Always helps.
But again, that's not what you read this for. Or that's not like what, 17-year-old me was reading this for.
What do people read this for then? I guess
It's essentially pornographic.
Really? Well, that's the... Okay.
I mean, that's what I was explaining before, right? Like,
Right.
it's just all of these girl fantasies. I mean, there's this moment, like when the thing that works is like in the moment when he's telling Bella that she needs to like figure it out. She needs to like figure out his secret that he can't tell. She now knows that he knows that Edward's a vampire and that all the Cullens are, by the way, like, which is
Just bloodsuckers.
fun.
Filthy bloodsuckers.
Worlds collide. But in that moment, he's like, I need you.
Right.
I need you refreshed to, like, any phrase that's going to, like, contain the words I need you from a dude to, like, a, 17-year-old girl is going to be like, oh, yeah.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit last episode when we talked about the first book, like what the female sensibility associates with sex in a text versus what the male associates.
It's not even like about like the sex. It's about I mean maybe it is, but like
Well,
it's
yeah. Good. Speak on it, yeah, dude.
I mean, I assume it's the same way in which like dudes are super visual, right?
Right. Yeah. Just literally.
Sex.
Well, it's, what triggers the associations, and I get that's partly personal to almost everybody, right? But then also, there's a little bit more universal to it to some extent.
I think there's a lot more. I don't know. There's a lot of mental shit. I think.
Well, that's what I mean, and that's not. And yeah, maybe sex is the wrong word for it.
I think there's like the romance fantasy.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially for like a teenage girl. Right. It's not just about like, oh, I got laid.
Yeah, very big difference there.
Which is very, very different for dudes. I feel like for dudes, it's like, getting laid.
Right.
It's
High
not like
fives.
falling in love, and being everything.
Yeah.
Being needed, being wanted.
Going to the grocery store for Charlie.
Being loved.
Yeah. Heating up fish for Charlie.
Being protected. It's all of these things. Like, it doesn't.
Right.
And I think it had it emphasized sex too much.
Well, I think you're
right. It
right.
wouldn't have alienated readers, but it didn't need to be there. And I do think it was probably smart to do that with an audience that was probably like, 16 and didn't want
right.
parents to be like, no, you can't read that.
Right.
And there probably still were. I'm sure there were.
I mean, dude, there were people that said Harry Potter was like the devil and shit when it came out. So yeah, of course. There's always going to be people that do that.
But like like my big thing is like, why don't they kiss? Like, why doesn't she kiss Jacob? Like that's what Like, I don't crave much more than that from this book. I don't, like, that's it. I don't need them to have sex for this. I will eventually need them to have sex for this to continue. It cannot stay this way.
A couple divided cannot stand. Yeah.
But, like, I mean, that's all it is. It's just like some weird, like, emotional, vicarious experience.
Which almost all books, right? You could make that argument. We could broaden it
Like,
to all.
I would say,
Yeah.
especially with like teen
Right.
books, like, and especially with these, because like these characters are not fleshed out really well. Like, they don't feel very real, and that I think becomes ever more apparent when you watch the movies, that they don't feel like real characters.
It's
Like,
interesting.
or they feel lacking.
Yeah. And we talked
But
about
you can
that.
you can project whatever,
Right.
fantasy went onto it and just play that game.
Right.
And I think, like, that's, I mean, when you're like a teenager, like, all like fucking people doing the Harry Potter thing and be like, which house would you be in? Like, it's all about inserting yourself into that world. It's what a lot of fantasy is. I would say it's maybe different for something like, I mean, yeah, it's different for something like Game of Thrones that's maybe more directed toward adults. But I think for teens, it's really about putting them into the character.
Well, I'll say this too. Like, this is, and we talked about this a little bit. We didn't say it explicitly, but there is like, this is a series, people can get upset about, but like, it was written and marketed to teen girls. Like, that is what it was. Whereas something like Harry Potter was not exclusively.
That's with who it was successful with.
Right. Right. And that's why this is much more like, women were very into Twilight, and like everybody was into Harry Potter. I just like distinctly, like,
And
that's
like your
a factor.
parents could like get some enjoyment out of Harry Potter.
Yeah,
They're
that's what I mean. It
maybe
wasn't
less likely
exclusively.
to find that with this.
Yeah, it wasn't exclusively kind of a romance genre.
It was more family friendly.
Well, this is family friendly too. I mean, we talk about, how sterilized the relationships, the sexual activity, whatever. These are young adult books.
But like,
it's not
your
gonna
dad's not gonna be like, oh,
Right.
that's fun, because it's not like the greatest tension again is like, won't they stay together? Is
And-
he gonna be like, I'm too dangerous and he's gonna run off again? Like, that's gonna be the whole, like, that. I mean, maybe not. Like, you're able to stay with it, and
I don't
or maybe,
dislike it. Like, I don't.
yeah, like, you're more
dislike
into it
yeah,
than
than I thought I would be.
maybe is, I don't know. I guess even I like feel weird about that. I was like, you know what? I'm fangirling for this right now, so we're just gonna lean into it. Like, I enjoyed the shit out of this. I have been. I've said that already. There's a lot to be critical of. It's like not. I keep saying it's like not a good book, but clearly it's done something successfully.
Well, that's a good point, and we should clarify it right now for listeners. Like, and it makes me think of that Pauline Kael essay, "Trash Art," where she talks about, we say it's a bad book, but we say that in the context of a literary book, right? So we're saying it's a bad book because it's not literary, but that isn't the sole aim of the artistic endeavor of writing novels, right? Like, that isn't the sole
like,
aim. There are other aims, and this one is doing one of them. It's just not achieving that. Oh my God,
there's just something about it that feels like, I mean, okay, this is the wrong comparison to make. I know that this is a wrong comparison to make, and I know that there's like some degree of this that doesn't line up, but it's almost, and maybe it puts pop fiction in a bad light, but like, it almost feels like critiquing, like giving like a really in-depth film critique of like a pornographic film.
Which is happening, dude. That's happening in grad schools all over the country. So yeah.
And like, so there are things that I can see, like, oh my God, like, I remember when I was reading this, like, my friends sister-in-law who's older than us and was old, like an adult while we were like at the later end of our teens. Super feminist, which, like, cool, but still not really up on that at this time. And her, criticism was that, like, Bella's this character that's like, she's always got to be saved. That's why I was like, oh, she's so clumsy. She can't, like, just exist, She has to be saved. And she's painted as this character that, like, needs constant saving, and guys, like, are always treating her like she's, like, delicate and, like, can't fend for herself, and seemingly she can't, or, like,
Right.
seems to also think of herself that way to some degree, which isn't super great. I also think we mostly grow out of that, and that's, like, it's just part of, like, this girl fantasy of, like, needing to be needed and needing to, like, desire, like, it's the savior fantasy, it's the hero fantasy, it's the
Princess
prince
fantasy.
yeah, the princess, damsel in distress fantasy. And I don't think you just sort of, you can have the whole gender conversation about that, I'm sure, and how it's, we're socialized to feel this way about ourselves as women, but also, like, you grow out of it, I think. Or
Well,
I
think
did.
you're
But
touching on something, though. I think that is one of the major conflicts. So we could look at this through, like, kind of like a college classroom feminist lens. We could, and you could make a lot of critiques about it. Sure, we've done it on this podcast before, but there's also the very real kind of thing inside. I don't want to generalize too much, but, like, kind of inside a lot of young women, right? And young men too. I mean, this isn't like to like you said, we could separate out sexes, genders, but, like, we don't have to. But there is that kind of, I want to be saved, right? Like, it's like, and there's two things.
Or I want to do the saving. Like, I don't
Right.
know what male fantasy is like at that age. I assume it's far more sexual.
It's all sex. Yeah, it is.
I
This
assume
girl's
it's
gonna
far
touch my
more
penis.
sexual. And for women, I think, and for girls, I think it's like, I want him to want to kiss me tenderly
Yeah, hold my head.
and hold my hand
Yeah.
and take me out and, like, be nice to me. And, like, it's a different, I think it's just such a different thing. Like,
Well, it's because they treat those two things as if they're not mutually exclusive. Like, they are interlinked somewhat. But I think when we do, like, kind of like a feminist lens on books like this, especially a character like Bella, it's just we're pretending that both things can't be true at the same time, right? Like, yeah, maybe Bella is a little bit too passive damsel in distress, but, like, and, we could argue that that's
but she's different.
but, like, there's also, because there's that, you can do both, right? Like, you can believe that, yes, this is taking away a woman's
it's all of
agency,
the fantasy.
right? But it's also touching on the very real fantasy of,
You can
the
be
princess.
the hot girl. You
Yeah.
can be the girl that everyone wants at school. You can also be the weirdo. You can be different. You can be the smart girl. You can be the girl who hangs out with monsters and listens to rock. Like, it's just like, it's every...
Hold you in my arms.
Yeah, man. Good song.
I just want you to hold.
Yeah, it's a good fucking song.
It's fucking great, dude. Like, I put that on when you sent me that you sent me that acknowledgement. So I was like, you know what? I haven't listened to Muse in a while, and they haven't dropped an album since, like, 2008. So, like, I put that on. And I was like,
throw
oh,
on
this
some
is
Muse every once
great.
in a while.
This is a
He'll
great
saw
track,
some Muse on
dude.
his iPod.
Yeah.
I guess on his iPhone. Throw
That's
it
a
on
great
the car
track,
every once
dude.
in a while.
That's a great fucking track, man. Like, it holds up. Not everything holds
Yeah.
up 10 years later. This thing, that
Catchy
song
as
holds
shit.
up. Yeah.
Starlight.
But you are, like, that's what like, it is this conflict, and it's a very real conflict, and it doesn't negate the feminist
Well,
critique.
especially when you don't fucking know who you are because you're
Right.
a fucking 17-year-old.
But I just mean, like, both
And
are
I
valid.
think, I think that's fucking fine.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I
Like,
think
both
it's fine.
are.
Like, I think yeah, they're both totally valid.
Right.
Like and in all of those ways, this isn't a good book, and it's also still plenty enough compelling for me to want to read it. And it was
Exactly. Yeah.
certainly tapping into all of the things that I wanted it to when I was reading it for the first time.
And this is
And
where
also, there's that like very hot part that's also very cringe when Bella is like, "What's tempting you more, my blood or my body?"
ooh, yeah, that is
Cringe. There are a lot of cringe moments.
it's cringe, but
And
if Kristen
especially
Stewart
toward
said
the
that to
end.
me, I would be like,
Ugh.
yeah. But yeah, there is that level of it too. But yeah, you're right. Like both are valid. Like we could go, and this would make me think of that Pauline Kael essay, so Trash Art, where she talks about how like just because something like Twilight, which we would call not high-minded art, gives us pleasure, like a candy bar gives us pleasure, doesn't mean we have to fit it into these frameworks, right? Like it doesn't. It can just be that. It can just be a good piece of trash art that we enjoy. It doesn't have to be forced into these frameworks of like, well, it's not a good book because it doesn't do this high-minded, like, or it's not a this, as we start applying all these high-minded critiques to it. Like,
Yeah,
she
and
just
when you
talks
go
about,
for enough school, I think there's an element of shame that's like supposed to be around it that I think you also probably grow out of a lot of once you're out of that world.
dude,
I
that's,
think a lot of people do.
I'm glad you brought that up because this is a constant theme on Heavy Board about being shamed into reading, and this is a different type of shame, but it exists, and it exists very much in the high-minded kind of academic world, right? Like this kind of, oh, you read that, oh, you
Oh,
read
you read
that,
those mom thriller books?
oh,
That's
right, yeah,
nice. It's good that you read. You
right,
know,
or it's
it's
or
that. But it's like, yeah, fucking it is
right,
good that you read. Like, have fun.
exactly,
Like,
yeah,
you don't have to feel all that shame because you were like, I mean, it's
and we
different if you're like, I guess, an English major and you're like, I need to be well read to feel like not a piece of shit. And that's a whole other world of neuroticism. But yeah, you don't, I feel like there's this fucked up thing that, you know, you have to pretend that you're not going to be interested in reading the Hunger Games
right.
because you, I don't know, want to write like you only read literary shit.
Well, it's a judgment. It's also a like, well, you're less than, right? It makes people feel better about themselves to say, well, I
Well,
only
they're gonna
read
judge your taste.
that,
I
which
think
you can
that you like
judge.
hold it on some like
We're pro
because you do
judgment.
meet
Yeah.
people that will like hold those things at the. I don't know. Like I have a
Yeah.
lot of conflicting feelings about this.
Yeah, I mean, which is normal. And again, listeners, this podcast is pro judgment. Like we're
Yeah,
pro
we're very judgmental.
making a
So
judgment, but don't hide away from that judgment with like, well, that's low-minded, right? Like, yeah, like that's not a reason to be judgmental. Like you can be judgmental. It's just not a good reason to be. I don't know. This is why I just think of like trash art is one thing. This kind of lowbrow, like Pauline Kael calls it a candy bar, right? Like we enjoy trash art, like we enjoy eating a Snickers bar.
junk
Okay, junk food, but it's more, but you know, there's nothing wrong with that,
not without
right? Yeah, like
not without its nutritional benefits.
right, yeah, not without its nutritional benefits, but you should
It
probably
brings
eat.
joy.
Yeah, but there is this shame, right there, and then there's this level of superiority, especially when we get towards the academic side of things. It's like, okay, being well read, right? I like this book, and you like that book, therefore I'm better than you, right? Or I'm smarter
Or
than
well, it's
you,
more
or
like, oh,
I'm
you didn't judge that book to be not good
right,
in this framework. And it's not that you don't, you can understand that it's not, you know, well written
right,
and still, you know, like you can have a different taste for like a literary novel, but like this like these are books that are like 600 pages long that you know we'll read in 3 days and then I'll spend 2 weeks reading a 200-page Virginia Woolf novel.
yeah.
It's like a really different like kind of turning off your brain a little bit reading. It's more like watching TV.
Well, and those two contradictions. So, like, some people would argue that you can't do both, but like, of course we can. Why can't we, right? Like, why can't we have both?
Do both what?
Well, like, have
Judge it and enjoy it?
well, understand it for what it is, and still have that kind
Oh,
of.
yeah.
Same thing with the what we were talking about, like the kind of what a feminist critique of this would be, or at least a feminist critique of the Bella character. You can have that, and it's a contradiction of, well, Bella's just a teenage girl, but you can have both contradictions in your head at the same time, because I mean, it's a fucking book, people. Like, it's not it's a fucking fictional story. Like, we can have contradictory thoughts about the same thing in our head at the same time, and like both can be correct, kind of, you know, like both can be valid, not necessarily correct because they're opinions on books, but like, you know, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get too
Remember
bogged
when
down.
Jacob says, "I'm so mad I could spit"?
I do
Those are
remember
my
that
favorite
very
ones.
distinctly, and being like, oh, cringe. Fuck, I gotta pee, hold up. All this goddamn coffee.
So mad I could spit.
All this damn coffee.
Yeah, when Jacob says he's so mad he could spit, I was like, oh yeah, this sucks. I love it.
All right. The only other thing I would talk about in terms of the book is the final confrontation between Edward and Jacob.
Hang on. This is the moment when I was like, he's Daddy Jacob now.
What page?
It's I'm on 308. It's 308 and 309. I threw my arms around him. It reminded me of that first day with the motorcycles. He was bigger though, and I felt even more like a child now. And then he starts calling her honey, and I was like, yeah, he's Daddy Jacob now. He's a big boy. He's Daddy Jacob. He's calling her honey. She's a little girl. Yeah, it's a whole weird dynamic. Or his character suddenly shifts,
Yeah.
and suddenly he starts talking like he's older than her. So I just thought that was kind of weird, but that's what I meant by that.
Yeah.
Honey, Bella, honey.
Bella, honey. Bella.
He released me, lifting his other hand to brush his fingertips along my cheek, trailing them down to my jaw. I could feel his boner tremble.
Oh, yeah.
Not with anger this time. Yeah, this is another moment when they're about to kiss, but don't. There are a number of those. Really difficult for me. Really wanted it. And
Yeah.
I wasn't even like big on Jacob, you know, because it's very clear that that's never going to be the final solution. I didn't mean a final solution in that way. I feel like that was a wrong phrase. I don't mean it in the Hitler way.
Yeah, I think your mic switched again.
God fucking damn it, dude. I didn't mean the final solution. I just mean the final outcome. It's not going to be the final outcome. We're switching devices now. Okay, we're back.
Yeah, that's much better, yeah.
What was I saying?
Jacob, Daddy Jacob.
Daddy Jacob. Yeah, they don't make out. I wanted them to make out. They came much closer to making out, it felt like, in the movie. I was
They
like,
did.
come on.
Yeah.
Give me that tension. I want it to be messier. Make it more complicated.
And it would have been more complicated if they were making out and like doing that regularly, and Edward comes back type thing. Like, it would have made it, elevated it a little
So
bit
much-
more
yeah.
than just, well, we talked and we flirted and like held hands a little bit.
And clearly, like, I love him, but not in that way.
Right.
Because, like, clearly, like, come on. Like, come the fuck on. She calls him beautiful. He's ripped. He's, like, 6'5". Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless he's got, like, bad, hot breath. That could be really bad.
That werewolf
But, like,
breath.
come on. She's 18, sitting in the car with Daddy Jacob, not making out.
Yeah.
Pissing me off. They're, like, cuddling, you know? Like, yeah, whatever. If you're cuddling, you're probably also making out.
I just want you to hold. Yeah.
Yeah, so she uses him. That pisses me off. She doesn't make out with him. Also pisses me off. Like, if you're gonna use him, like, do it all the way.
Yeah. Very much. Very much. All right. Final confrontation between Edward
So-
and Jacob. Or do you want to hit the voluntary?
I mean, we just have to say how this happened. So, like, that was stupid, right? Like, I mean, it's the Romeo thing. Like, oh, he thinks that Bella's dead. So we all think that Bella, like, she's cliff jumping, but, like, Alice sees that she jumps off a cliff and doesn't see her come out. So she must be dead. The thing that really got me here is, like, how sh they see, like, Bella sees Carlisle's car,
Right.
but Alice had flown.
Right.
Alice had gotten on a plane to come see Bella, like, very urgently. I was like, how do you, like, I guess it doesn't matter. I'm just willing to overlook this. It's not a big thing, but it was weird. I was thinking about that in the movie too. I was like, what?
Trash art.
Yeah.
We can get our pleasure from it, but let's not
Oh,
confuse it
yeah.
for what it is. Yeah.
It's so, like, that's the main thing, right? So Edward's gonna kill himself by going to Italy and getting, you know, the vampire monarchy to rip him apart. And Alice is like, we have to stop him. The only way to do it is for me to take you to Italy. He has to see you.
He won't believe me.
They also, like, yeah, that was funny. I think the part where, like, they think that Carlisle has just called
Oh, right.
to find out if Bella is alive. I was glad that they cut that out of the movie and they just, like, it was just Edward.
Well, it was Edward
The idea
disguised as
of that-
Carlisle the whole
yeah.
time.
Edward disguised as Carlisle. He said he was Carlisle.
You learned that.
Jacob answers the phone. He's like, Charlie's not here. He's at the funeral because his friend just died, but he didn't say that. So Edward thinks it's Bella who's dead. Yeah, it's like, whatever. It's just convoluted enough, I guess.
And if thinking about it right now in terms of logical, right, like Alice could only see possibilities, like if she knew that they're decisions, but like Bella hadn't made the decision to kill herself, but somehow Alice's vision convinced everyone that, it kind of makes the logic
And
of
that
Alice's...
she also didn't see the two vampires that, like, that were hunting Bella
Right.
throughout this. So, like, those two vampires that weren't dead from the last book, that were actually, like, the cause of all these murders, that or all of these, and, like, that's why, you know, we have wolves now, because these vampires are around.
Yeah, there's a little bit of mystery towards that. It's like they act like the werewolf thing is like a new thing that nobody knows how to deal with, and even the elders don't know how to deal with. And
Well, they do, but it's just like there's something mentioned about the werewolves coming in cycles, and I think maybe
and the
movie
bloodlines
kind of does an okay job of dealing with that and being like, you know, when there's like a threat, that's when the fever sets in, is what he calls it.
Yeah, when you come of age, you get the fever, but it's like also has to do with your bloodlines. Like if you were part of the chiefs that were descended from the chiefs of the tribe kind of thing, or the elders of the tribes, you were able to, I don't know, you had to have the right bloodline to be able to do this and all that kind of shit.
Yeah, there could have been a little more lore.
It was just and I mean, we talked about that in the first one too, is a lot of the lore was like missed opportunities, and I think that's because, you know, she was a new writer, she was just starting this kind of thing, had no idea that it would blow up into this huge thing, so, you know, whatever,
and also,
right?
like, that's not what I was reading it for when I was 17.
Right, exactly, yeah. Logical inconsistencies.
Like, I was the most bored during those moments when I was 17, because that's not what I was reading for.
What were you reading for?
How many times do I have to say it, man?
Yeah.
It's just that hot talking.
Hot talking. All right. Do you want to move to the
Yeah, man.
Edward Jacob final confrontation, or do you want to
God.
hit anything before we
I
hit that?
mean, the things that I want to say is just one thing that really fucking bothered me in the book that wasn't in the movie was that when Bella gets to Edward and prevents him from revealing himself to humans as a vampire and like trying to kill himself, whatever, he does this whole, oh, I must be dead. I'm dead, right? Because you're here. I must be dead.
Oh, right.
Like
Yeah.
he's doing this really dumb thing, and it was so fucking annoying. I found that so frustrating. And I found it frustrating again when Bella did exactly the same thing when he was still there the next day. When Bella was like, I'm still dreaming, right?
Right.
Or I must have died. I must have actually drowned and none of this happened. It just didn't feel real at all. It felt so silly.
Yeah.
Especially with Edward. It felt the silliest with Edward.
Yeah. It was, and I want to get into that when we hit the movie too, like this kind of, like how that kind of got screwed up in the movie too, but like, I was a little kind of, my question about the final confrontation between Edward and Jacob was, what are we supposed to make of this?
Oh.
He wants to talk to me, Edward says. And then they talk to each other. And
Well, what do you mean he wants to talk to me? When was that? I don't remember it.
it's at the end, they're back from Italy. The kind of main confrontation is over in the book.
Yeah. But
And then
Bella
Jacob
goes
and
with him.
Edward have this kind of confrontation in the woods.
Yeah, but isn't Bella there?
Yeah, Bella's there. Yeah, Bella's there for it.
They have a confrontation. I mean, the whole confrontation is that, like, well, first of all, Bella has just proposed that she should be turned because this whole thing happened with the Volturi, right? They basically say, like, you can't have a human, we have to kill her. You can't have a human that knows.
Right.
And they're like, no, we'll turn her. Or Alice is like, no, she's going to be one of us. It's fine. And they're like, okay, well, if you keep your promise, then it's fine. Totally uneventful, really stupid. More needed to happen there. Like, it's like they go to these like crazy psycho vampire monarchs that are supposed to be like crazy deadly. And nothing more happens than just them talking it out, really.
Yeah.
But after all of that, Bella goes to like Edward's family and is like, well, are you gonna do it? Like, or are we just gonna hide me from the Volturi? Because that's stupid. And basically, they sort of vote that yes, you should become a vampire as a collective. And then Jacob turns up to be like, by the way, it's not just if you kill a human, it's if you bite a human. So if you change Bella, we will kill you. We'll destroy you. Is what that final thing was, or is how I read it.
Yeah.
Also, this whole thing is like, that's also, this is before or after, I don't remember. This is like after
It's like the very
Edward.
end. Yeah.
Yeah, so Edward has already proposed to Bella. He's like, this is my condition. If you want me to be the one to change you, marry me.
Right.
And she's like, what? And she's not like excited. She's not like pleased, but he's like, yeah, well, I'll be with you forever. I'm promising myself to you, basically. Which has been her entire fear through all of the first two books. She's prepared to become a vampire to be with him forever, but not to also marry him. Which I find confusing, but I guess also makes sense if if I was like reading this as a 17-year-old, I would be like, vampire, yes, marriage, no. Like that. So like in that way, I guess it makes sense, but it was like now it does not.
And then like Edward not letting Bella touch Jacob.
Yeah, also the motorcycle thing. I was like, damn, Jacob.
Oh, right. They don't
Ouch.
put that in the movie, but then like yeah, the Jacob's trying to get her in trouble.
Yeah, he drops off her motorcycle and leaves it in the driveway or something so Charlie will ground her.
She's like, I'm
And now
already
Eddie can
grounded.
read Jacob's mind, so he's like, "Oh, well, he was just hoping that he, that would keep you away from me for a while." He was like, "I had to try."
Yeah.
And it's so funny because he does sort of seem like a silly little boy in those moments. They do sort of make him seem that way.
Right. There is that moment of sympathy, and it's kind of dumb that they have him change into a wolf at the end. And this is in the movie because he doesn't change into a wolf at the end in the book with like the final kind of confrontation with him and Edward, right? But like in the movie, they have
Yeah.
him morph into a wolf, and then they have him kind of be like sad-eyed dog, kind of. It's like that would have hit harder if he was human form and had the little tear up and then ran away kind of thing, and it would have made him seem much more like you said, like a little boy who kind of doesn't understand, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, throughout the book, if and most of the movie, I feel like Jacob is easier to sort of sympathize with just because you're so frustrated with Edward's bullshit at this point of being
Right.
like, I'm not good for you. Like
Yeah.
we've hit that a little too hard and also doesn't quite make sense after her actual run-in with like a, life-threatening situation
Right.
last book. So, but also in the movie, the thing when Jacob gets mad at the movie theater, when he freaks out at Mike, is so goofy in the movie.
Yeah. Which that isn't in the book. They make him be like a little tense, but he's not
Yeah,
like
he's
it's not
like
that
just
goofy. Yeah.
yeah, it just seems like he also isn't feeling well. Like he might
Right.
be nauseous or something. But he doesn't like rage out, which seemed so strange and out of just really poorly acted. And but it was also like poorly written. It wasn't good. They have Bella just hop on this guy's motorcycle in that one scene in Port Angeles when she's with Jess at the movies too.
Yeah.
When she's like pretending to not be depressed. When she first hears Edward's voice, she just gets on this guy's motorcycle
Which isn't in the book,
and they
but
like drive around the block.
yeah.
Oh my God, dude, Bella screams after Edward dumps her in the movie. Kristen Stewart lets out these like heartbroken screams that when I heard it the first time, I laughed. And I tried really hard to like put myself in to be more
Yeah.
forgiving of it, but it was so goofy.
Yeah.
It was so hard to.
The nightmare screams too were a little. They were laid on pretty thick in the movie. Like we didn't. We only needed to see it twice, and yet we saw it like 5 times. Like her waking up
All of
screaming.
her, all of her "I've been dumped" screams, though, her
Yeah.
"I'm broken" screams were so fucking. I mean,
All right. Well, this. All right. Like, yeah, this is a good thing to segue into the movie here because we're already talking about it. But
well,
just
yeah. I was
just
gonna
based
say,
off
I'm
the
already.
book, my last couple of questions was like, are we supposed to think of Bella as annoying?
Dude, I don't think so. Like, I think we're supposed to identify with Bella, but she is fucking annoying a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I mean teenagers are.
I mean, so is Edward.
Yeah.
He's
Forever
been a
teenager.
teenager for
Yeah.
multiple years.
And he's an emo teen now in the early 2000s, so he's like,
He was so emo. He was extra emo in this, and his face was extra weird
yeah,
and
yeah.
extra lipstick.
Yeah, yeah. And then my other question was, so I mean, I guess you could make an argument, but like, is Bella leading on all these men? And not just Jacob and Edward, but like, what's his name, Mike?
I think she really shuts him down pretty good,
Yeah, she
and
does.
enough, you know,
Right.
frequently enough, I think. But I think, yeah, I don't know, the way she treats people is not great. I think that with Jessica, especially,
At a point
as
in the
someone who
book,
she doesn't even like.
Right.
which is maybe honest to how girls are to some degree.
Yeah.
But there's also a person that she likes more that she chooses not to hang out with, which seems weird. Jacob, I think she is being an asshole. I think what would have saved it is if Stephenie Meyer just like let her kind of fall in love with Jacob a little bit and then walk it back. Like
Yeah.
but she does, but like, come on, let them kiss. Like, I think that would have helped.
And I think in the books, there's actually a part where she does kind of admit in the narration that she's leading Jacob on, or that Billy
Yeah.
kind of knows, understands Jacob's dad in the series.
Yeah.
Kind of is aware that this pretty girl is just kind of toying with his son, rather. But yeah.
Well, and at first she is, and they do make it seem even more like that in the movie, I think, when she just straight up. I mean, first of all, she goes and seeks out these motorcycles because she only takes them because she thinks that Jake will fix them.
Right.
Like, she's only hanging. I mean, like, the way that it's framed is like, I feel better when I'm around him. So on the one hand, it seems like selfish and kind of fucked up, but like very teenager. Like, oh, I'm trying to patch up this hole that this guy left. There also is like that hand holding moment where she's like, I think it means something different to you than it does to me. So like there's an awareness, like he's
Right.
aware that she's still like in pain. And they make reference to that a lot. But there's also that moment when he's about to kiss her and she's like, no, I hadn't decided yet. I haven't made a choice yet. So like, dude, just like let it happen. Like, I wish that had just happened. I don't know why. Maybe it's like this little girl inside of me that's like, kiss, kiss, kiss.
Yeah.
You know?
I will say, and I texted you about this, that when watching that movie, you can tell that like Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson were fucking because like
Oh, yeah.
they just have great chemistry together.
Great chemistry. He still
Yeah.
makes the dumbest fucking faces in that movie.
He does, and I was thinking about that because Sophie and I were talking about this a little
I mean,
bit.
is it
like,
just because he was fresh? You know? Or maybe he had fake teeth in or something. I couldn't tell if he had some kind of like teeth thing going on. The makeup is bad. It really doesn't help. It's one thing to make him pale. It's another thing to make him pale and also make his lips look like almost metallic.
Yeah, and I will say that Pattinson is a much better actor than like all the other main characters in the movie series that were cast.
But his character is written really poorly in the book
Yes.
and in the movie.
Yes.
Like, and there's too much emo and not enough charm.
Yeah, and
And I think
noticed
we get a little more of that in the first book, is a little more charm.
in that scene in the movie in particular when they're breaking up, so like the first 15-20 minutes when they're in the woods and he's telling her that he has to leave or whatever to keep her safe, his lines and even Stuart's lines, they're very bad lines. But Pattinson does everything he can with them, I think. Like, he does make the delivery more like a kind of well-trained actor would, as opposed to just like trying to make it sound natural or something, and I was thinking this too, because Stewart, although I mean, listeners will know by now, I have a thing for Kristen Stewart, but like, I can objectionably say she's not the best actress. She's not the best, actor. She's fine, right? But she's not great actress or anything like that. And I was like, okay, because Bella is kind of a tough character to play.
Well, yeah, but also like, I mean, they both are. I think maybe Bella has like a little more going on. Like, we don't know. We get nothing from Edward except that he's hot. He plays piano. He's kind of brooding and maybe a little snarky. But like, that's pretty much like, and is definitely like crazy overprotective and like maybe to the point of like a personality disorder. I don't fucking know. They both kind of are.
And that's what I noticed too. Like, my
But-
note in that scene for where they're like breaking up and leaving, I was like, yeah, this scene is just as awkward and strange as it is in the book, because it's a very strange rationale that's like used to justify it, and it's just not enough there. Like, there's not enough meat on the plate when you're like trying to explain this huge catastrophic thing, whereas this love that just got conquered, like not even got like literally won the day, their love for each other won the day in the last book, and then within the first 3 chapters there's like this really kind of unbelievable, awkward, strange kind of I can't be with you, and it's like, hold on, like,
Yeah, and Bella didn't even get like fucked up so bad, like this was the most minor of incidents, and it's just like one of those things where like it goes back to that, like that first moment wasn't enough to carry what came after.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Like that wasn't enough of an incident to make sense.
right. And I think that's just a meat and
And
potatoes.
maybe it's supposed to be like some element of surprise thing, like we're supposed to be shocked that it happens.
Right.
And like I think I was really surprised that it happened. But like, yeah, that was the whole tension of the first book, is will he leave her? And that's the first thing that happens in the second book, which seems unbelievable. And that's also, but like then that's also like somehow his thing at the end is like, I can't believe you believed me, which goes back to this weird fucked up gaslighting thing that he seems to do a lot.
Yeah.
I told you I didn't love you, but you weren't supposed to believe me. I expected to have to convince you of it. Why don't you think you're lovable? Except for the fact that I tell you that. It's like this constant back and forth of like him gaslighting her and then being like, but you should understand that you're perfect. And then him being like, I need to leave.
Did you notice that they put the months section in the movie?
So
You didn't see that scene where she's sitting in the window and it's raining in Washington, and like the camera's kind of doing a 360 around her, and they just have the months flash up on the screen every time it makes a full 360.
no,
And it's like,
I was probably making a coffee.
yeah. So they put those.
Because Bill kept being like, okay, I'm starting it. Are you ready? I was like, I'm going to make a coffee. And he was like, I'm starting it while you're making a fucking coffee.
But they
He
put
was
the
not
months in there, dude.
pleased that this was our activity.
Well, and we already mentioned this, but that's the thing, right? Like, this was exclusively marketed to young girls, and the only men that consumed this were because young girls made them, right? Like, young girls they were interested
Or
in.
because that was the way to get them on a date to the movies.
Right,
or
exactly,
something.
yeah. Forced to watch the movie, forced to do that, right? Like, forced to read the books, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I did notice those months in there, dude, and I was like, oh, they put the months in there. They put that corny shit in there. They did it better in the movie because it works better in a movie.
It was still bad.
Yeah, it was still bad, but the way they did the camera.
At the same time, I didn't want to sit. I mean, that's so much of Bella wallowing.
Yeah. It was literally her
It's
crying.
also, what was it like at school, Like, it just all seems really, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
There was just, I noticed they also, like, the wolf girl, the one that's, like, engaged. We
Emily
didn't talk about that. Yeah, Emily, who's, like,
got, like, abused by her wolf husband or whatever, that slashed her fucking body.
by accident.
Yeah.
They really make it sound like she's really badly fucked up looking on half of her face, and the other half is beautiful. She didn't look that bad in the movie.
Yeah.
I was like expecting her to be more fucked up.
It's the same type of thing, right? Like, there's some things that if you showed like how ugly it could be in a movie, it's almost hard to look at. Like, I always think like Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones. Like, in the books, he's supposed to be really much uglier, and he's supposed to have like lost half his face in that battle, the Battle of the Blackwater there. Yeah. And they leave all that out because otherwise it would just be like a hideous creature to look at. Like, like every time he comes on screen, he's missing his nose, and like, half his chin or something is supposed to be like clopped off by an axe during that scene. So I understand why visually, we don't want to see too much horrific shit, or it becomes a horror genre pretty quickly, kind of. Although this works the line because it is vampires and werewolves, but
Yeah. The movie was pretty goofy. There wasn't a lot of chemistry between Bella and Jacob.
Yeah. And that too, because that's another, yeah, you could tell that Stewart and Pattinson were fucking at the time because it is like,
Also, like, he, like, felt younger.
yeah. And I mean, he's supposed to, right? He's supposed to be
Yeah.
younger than her.
But at some point, he no longer feels younger.
Right.
Like, in the book. At some point, he becomes
Yeah.
Daddy Jacob.
That's a strange thing too, right? Because like actors are meant to pretend, right? Like they're meant to pretend this kind of stuff, but you can always kind of see it, like when they're fucking each other. Like there is that added level of
Yeah.
these guys have something between, like these two actors are really working off each other's vibes. Well, of course, because they fucked each other. Like they're fucking, like they know each other's, changes of voice and like intuitions and yeah.
Yeah, so one of the first things I noticed, like when like early on, like when Bella just shows up at school and fucking Jacob just comes walking out of the woods like, "Hey guys, I'm here. What's up?"
I drove an hour from the reservation just to come.
Yeah, just come say hey.
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
I'm not staying for school, and I go to my own school, but
I just wanted to see Bella.
just want to say happy birthday.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck are you doing here? You weren't even really friends, like, that we're aware of. Like, you weren't, like, close pals.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one thing I did. They tried to make the werewolves more important. When you look at that first movie, they did a pretty decent job. Melissa Rosenberg, the screenwriter, she wrote the second movie too. I haven't looked up the third yet because we haven't gotten there yet. But I would imagine she probably wrote all the screenplays because she made it work, that first one. They added more, and then in this one they kind of left out too much about the werewolves. I think because like this is like this building conflict and like the drama. So like. Yeah, I think it was almost they could have done more, especially with Sam, like leading the werewolves. Kind of like he was brought in, but he was much more insignificant in the movie than he was in the books. Like he was much more significant, and that was an opportunity too because right, like if they made Sam appear scary and daunting and his cult, and then Jacob's change is realizing that Sam is actually a good guy and is not trying to harm these young boys, he's trying to help them type thing. That's a big dramatic like kind of change in a character and in the plot. It could drive things, and I think that was ignored a little bit more than it should have been. I get it. The movie was already 2 hours and 10 minutes. You can't have everything in there, but there are a couple other things. Like you and I texted about this. Like they don't really make clear what Edward is doing in the movie. Like when he's exposing himself to the sunlight at the clock tower.
Yeah.
You're not
they
aware
just say
of that.
like, oh, he's gonna reveal himself. Like,
Well, you're aware of it if you read the book and then watch the movie. You know what's
Right.
happening. But if you didn't read
there's
the
a
book,
lot of that.
yeah, and this is the sign, I think this is the thing that always is overlooked, and this is the reason that book adaptations often fail when you take a novel and make it into a movie, is because the person writing it, and I can understand this, like you're reading the book constantly, right? Like you're reading it over and over again, you're pulling out what parts you want, you're outlining the script, right? I get it. Like you get so caught up in the kind of, I have to put this in, I have to put, like, you kind of lose track of the kind of taking a step back and being like, okay, if I didn't know anything about the book, would I be able to understand what's happening on screen right now? And I think that that's a huge disconnect that you start to see, and you start to see this in the later Harry Potter movies. You start to see this as big kind of sweeping epic series like this that started as novels start to fall apart a little bit. But yeah, like that was the first one I noticed where I was like, you're really not aware of most of what's happening with Edward unless you've read the book and you're watching this, because they don't explain why Edward's doing that. They don't explain how he was rejected that well. They really don't explain, the whole why they let them go kind of.
Yeah, they
thing.
also it was a really confusing. There's like, so one thing that's good is that more action happens when they're there in the movie than happens in the book, but it's not really, it didn't make sense to me why it was happening. Like, didn't they start fighting at some point? Oh, right, because they were like, we're gonna get rid of Bella now because she can't just know.
Right.
And then they have that fight, and Edward's being all emo. So at least there's like a little bit of action there that doesn't happen in the book.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was a little hard to follow if you hadn't read the book. I mean, I didn't have a problem because I read the book, but I just, as I was taking notes and I was, all right,
You
well,
also
this
don't
is
understand why the celebration's happening. Like you don't.
right. Yeah.
Like a lot of There's a lot of stuff that's not clear.
Same thing they don't do in the movie. They don't show Bella,
They don't show them travel to Italy. Like
which
we
is
don't
fine. Yeah.
see the time change because that's like the big tension of will they get there in time? Because they have to get
Right.
on a fucking plane, and that's the fastest way for them to get there.
Right. And then steal a Porsche 911 and cut up
Yeah.
the Italian countryside with it, man. Cut
Yep.
up this fucking. Yeah, they don't really show Bella leading Jacob on in the movie either.
No.
At least not as well as the book does or as clearly as the book does. So you're right. Like, so you lose a little bit of sympathy for Jacob because you don't see that. But, that's not a huge deal, but it is considering the main tension of the entire fucking series was she going to choose Jacob or Edward? Like, right? I mean, I haven't read all this series, I haven't watched all these movies, but like, even I know that again because it's just such a cultural phenomenon. I don't know. They had a different director for this one too. Fuck, I didn't write down the name, but I think it was a different director, and then Melissa Rosenberg was the same writer. But all right, my final questions about this kind of in the movies, right? Book or movie better?
Ugh. I gotta say book just because I don't know if I could have enjoyed the movie without the book. I asked Bill that too. I was like, do you think, like, I mean, he didn't have an answer really,
Yeah.
but I was like, can you, like, enjoy this with, like, the movie without
Right.
the book? And he's like, I bet some people can, but, like, I was like, I don't know.
Right.
Like, I think I'm only in this because I already know.
Yeah. That's what I would say too. So my answer changed from Twilight. In Twilight, the original book, I would say, so the movie is better than the book. But in this case, for New Moon, I would agree with you. I think the book is better than the movie in this case. It just
Yeah.
the movie doesn't quite where I think as like in the last one for the first movie, Twilight, it was able to make the book a little better paced. It was able to take the story and make it work a little bit better too. And then in this one, it's kind of, it failed to do that. So that's why I was like, all right, well, the book is better for this one. And I guess I mean, I don't know because I haven't seen it in the last 3 movies, but it's like when we get to them, I imagine my fear is that that's going to be a steady kind of decline as we progress through these
Yeah.
movies here. But yeah, for this one, I'd say definitely the book is better than the movie. Not true for the first
You
one,
also,
though. Yeah,
I mean, they also both seem more like assholes in the book. I'm sure I don't know that I've thought that the first time I read them. But like even this whole thing with like Edward sort of like selfishly being like, well, I can't live in a world where you don't exist, but like he obviously expects her to,
right.
and like to move on, knowing how she feels, and like it's this weird martyr. And like I don't know, there was this thing where like we see Bella being an asshole throughout the book, which again, I can't tell if that's like something I see now just as an adult and would not have, because I don't remember if I felt that way.
Right.
But again, not what I was really reading it for. But yeah, I don't know. They're back to being hot and heavy, although it is like more dumb in the book that like there's this whole like it's the same thing. I'm just gonna like keep repeating myself. This whole motivation of like, well, it seems that you cannot be safe, so leaving you isn't an option. It's like, oh, how cool.
Yeah.
So glad to know that if I could, like, if I was normal and could walk in a straight line without tripping over my feet, you would be free to go and would not be proposing to me.
Another question, and this is about both book or movie. We could talk both sips. This is there enough of a relationship with Jacob and Bella to believe it?
Not in the movie, no.
What about the book?
Maybe more, but like, it still just feels like Bella trying to convince herself. And I felt sort of mad at her the whole time for
Yeah.
being kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, I was like on his side. I wasn't like Team Jacob, but like like in a way.
And Jacob's more human.
I never see, I don't think when I was reading this, I ever saw that being a true option. Nor is it like you need to have the closure of them getting back together, I guess. Because that's like, it's a fucking romance novel.
Right.
But you also want to see it get messier and like be more of a realistic triangle and like have her be actually kind of,
Torn.
yeah. Because she's never actually torn in this. It's just
Right.
like, oh, but couldn't I at least try to make him happy if I'm going to always be forever miserable? I mean, I'm happier when I'm around him. Like, it's just this weird. I mean, she's the same as Edward. Like, they're the same character, basically.
Yeah.
They're both these weird martyr. I mean, it's like all fantasy shit. Like, no, let it be me. I'll go through the pain. It's
Yeah.
my pain. My depression.
And I was expecting a Muse song to play at some point in the movie, and it kind of never did.
Yeah.
I wonder if in the
There-
next movie they'll have like a Muse song over the credits.
Yeah, I think that they could have let her fall more in love with Jacob and it would have been better. I mean, like maybe it would have helped her have more substance if we saw her being more human with another person,
And
like
Jacob,
go on a more normal date, like just
right?
even as like a character building thing, which feels kind of silly to say in like the second book of a series to still need more character development of your main character, which is
Right.
ongoing, but like, you know.
And like I said, Jacob is kind of more human. Like werewolves are depicted in both as more human than vampires. They still eat food, right? Like they have body temperature. Like he's not like unable to kiss her because he might
Immortal.
kill her. Yeah. Yeah, he's not immortal either. Yeah, exactly. Like they age. There's all that. Yeah. So there is like more human elements to it, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it, that people tend to fall in the Jacobs camp just because, I don't know.
He also like has more of a character.
Yeah,
It feels like
especially in
beyond,
this book. Yeah,
because like I don't know, you see him like kind of at least to some degree interact with his friends. He's like playing more of what feels like some sort of trope of the slightly younger guy who's like family friend falls in love with girl next door kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. My last thing, and we
But
already. Yeah, go ahead.
but yeah, he's just like more normal. He's like more that he's less otherworldly.
Yeah, yeah, like more human. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My last thing, and we kind of already talked about this at the beginning, is what is it about the emo era?
Oh my God, dude. I mean, the hits, the fucking jams,
The girly boys with like eyeliner and hair
the
straighteners and
the tight pants,
yeah, the girl
the
jeans.
messy hair, the screaming is all very good,
Yeah,
you know, cathartic.
right. And that's, I mean, these books are very much a part of the cultural milieu that was happening at the time, right? Like the kind of
Indulgent.
Yeah, the
Really
indulgent.
self-indulgent.
Yeah. The poor me kind of.
Poor me, but also I'm just gonna like wear this shit to call attention to it. I'm
What's that be like the performative self
gonna wear
harm?
chains.
Yeah, the chains, the performative self harm, right? The
I'm hard, but I'm sensitive.
yeah, the I'm a freak, look at me type thing.
Yeah.
They would
Yeah.
literally sell T-shirts that said that, right? Like keep staring at me, blah blah. Like,
I'm different.
yeah, uh,
I'm
yeah.
not like other girls. I'm sad.
But then, yeah, like I kept thinking about that. Like, yeah, this fits in. It makes perfect sense when you were alive during that time, and you can look back at it now and be like, yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense why Twilight was such a hit because it fit perfectly into the fever of the emo era, like the kind of your lipstick is collar, don't bother Angel, right? Like it fit.
I know exactly what goes on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cute without the E, dude. That's the name of that song. Like, cut. Like, that is. It was very. Like, when it's like this performative self harm was very much part of it, right?
Fuck you, I hate life.
Yeah. And I think Edward's character especially starts to make a little bit more sense when you put it into the cultural context.
So emo, dude. So emo.
Yeah.
That picture I sent you when him and Kristen Stewart were like at some award thing or like maybe at a premiere.
I think it was one of the premieres because by the second movie it
Looked
had
like
come out that they were dating and like living together basically.
Dude, that hair. I was like, oh yeah. I mean, you know, like part of him did that. Part of him did it for like the I play Edward Cullen, and Edward Cullen has this sort of like carefully messy hair thing.
It was also just that was a
But
style at the time. Like that was part of
but
it, right?
like you also know that it was like in part because he was like, this is hot. This is hot right now.
Yeah, dude, the manic panics phase. The manic very hot topic.
Yeah.
Like you could walk into a Hot Topic and probably buy copies of Twilight at the time, like, or at least the T-shirts, like a New Moon, or like Edward or Edward versus Jacob tees. I remember those being big, right?
Yeah. Yeah, dude, you gotta. I mean, that picture, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a lot of. There are a lot of. Oh, there were so many like Team Jacob, Team Edward tees. I remember at that time being like, you can't do that. This isn't something where you can wear t-shirts for this. That's not socially okay.
Oh, well, we did it. Yeah.
I did that.
Well, I
But,
didn't
like, people
either,
did.
but
I mean,
yeah,
obviously you didn't. Like,
Yeah.
and I was into it.
right.
So even then there was like, I think a sense of shame about it, which is weird.
Well, by the time they're selling T-shirts of it, right, it's become mainstream. So it's now uncool to like something that's mainstream now. The kind of, we talked about this with Bogan, that Bogan quote, right? No longer worrying about not being a square, right? No longer struggling
Bogan.
to not be a square. This kind of,
Yeah.
it's cap. I mean, that's a true thing, right? Like, usually always comes from the external. Yeah, that picture. Yeah. He looks like a vampire in that fucking picture, dude.
Yeah, he's trying to, but he's like, it's hot though. The ladies like it.
Yeah, and Kristen Stewart like kept her brunette hair for a while.
Is she not?
She's not. No, I think she's kind of like a dirty blonde, natural, kind of like
What?
my hair. I think that's her natural hair, but she looks great as a blonde now, and she looks great as a brunette during the Twilight era. So that's, just speaks to her beauty kind of thing. But yeah,
Dang, I did not know that she was a blonde girl.
well, like kind of off blonde, not like the
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, that makes sense because she looks good with both types, like any type of that style. Even when she went like the very big, like shaved head, like I'm a lesbian, like kind of like when she shaved her head, kind of. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was just a couple years ago, right? That the shaved head phase.
Yeah, well, didn't she have like real short hair on that deep sea thing where she was like playing some chick on a submarine and she had
Yeah,
like
yeah,
super short bleached hair or
yeah,
something?
yeah.
And that movie could have been decent except that they like added the whole monster element.
I, yeah, that movie was a disappointment. But I remember her saying something because I think something big came out, right? I think it might have been Charlie's Angels, the reboot, where she played the main one a couple years ago, and I think it was like the same time period. But she said something about how like she had filmed that underwater one like a couple years before they filmed the Charlie's Angels. So like people were, but I think the Charlie's Angels came out before Underworld or Underwater was released or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much. I watched that movie one because it's a cool concept, two because yeah, Kristen Stewart was the star, dude. Although I haven't watched the Diana one yet, her biopic.
Oh boy. I should have made out.
2006, dude. 2006 was the peak. That's what I said. It was the peak of emo. What I was looking through, because when I looked through those albums,
Still should have made out.
2006, peak, man. So many fucking albums came out that year. Like I just couldn't believe how many great albums came out. How much it was tied into kind of like the emo shit.
Yeah, dude.
The
So
Underworld, the Underworld series, right? Kate
I don't
Beckinsale.
really actually. Yeah,
It's
I remember those.
that was a little bit
movies.
before all that. It was a little
Those
bit
weren't.
before.
Were those books?
No, those weren't books, but it was
Those weren't
still
books,
like it was a little bit before the emo takeover of everything. So it was still kind of that new metal, right?
Yeah.
Corn and all that kind of shit. Some
Yeah.
listeners will know what I'm saying, but whatever, just know that genre, right? And it's like that came out and that got very, Kate Beckinsale
Yeah.
in tight leather Matrix style kind of,
Oh, yeah.
pale vampires,
that
werewolves,
good shit.
yeah, like literally vampires versus werewolves were everywhere. I guess they always have been, but yeah. That's why I was like, yeah, maybe that's why I'm drawn to it more, or maybe it is just kind of like, well, I'm in the middle of a story right now because this story is four
Maybe
books
because
long.
you're waiting for them to make out already.
That, and like I do like the whole thing for me when I talk about stories, like I want to know how it ends, right? I want to be like, all right, well, what happens? And now that this story just is 4 books long, it's like, well, I have to read all these books if I want to know what happens.
I'm in it for the making out.
Yeah. Which there is very little of. Like there is very little of that.
Actually, very little of that in this one.
For the possibility of making out is most of the
Yeah.
tension in the series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great, but could have given me a little more this time.
I'm here for it.
Big hairy wolf dick.
Yeah.
Battle
Alright.
of the monster dicks. So that'll be the next one. Wolves or vampires?
Wolves and vampires. All right, are you done with this? Anything else?
Yeah, I'm done
I'm
with
done.
this.
Yeah, I'm done. We're burnt out with this. Okay, if you want to contact us at heavyboardpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe on whichever platform you consume your podcast. We're on all of them now. Subscribe to our Patreon if you want to receive uncensored episodes, get some of our locked episodes. We try to have some good ones for patrons. Check out our YouTube channels. All that's up there as well. We have clips up there. We always we would link all the books we talked about in the description to this, as well as a link to our RSS feed. And next episode, we are continuing the Twilight Saga. We did a slight change of plans. It's for our 0 listeners that are out there, so you won't mind, I'm sure.
We can't stop.
We can't stop. We were just like we were talking. We are just like, all right, we're just gonna go through the whole series now, and we'll touch colors theory of the lyric when we're done. So next episode we're doing Eclipse. Eclipse.
I
just
really
like
thought
me
you were just gonna say, we'll touch colors dick next week.
Yeah, we'll touch colors dick in a couple weeks, dude.
We're all about the wolf dick right now.
His
Wolf
throbbing,
and vampire dick.
yeah, dude. His throbbing theory. We'll touch that next time.
So hot.
This has been Heavy Board. I guess we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No! You know,
Resources.
life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources, American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I
Heavy.
should say.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.